Timeless Assassin by author. Raj_Shah_7152 Rodova Military Academy, Academy Mess Hall. One day before the midterm exam, the cafeteria was unusually quiet, but not for lack of people. Every table was filled. Every seat was occupied. And yet, despite the crowded space, the usual boisterous chatter and reckless laughter were gone. Instead, what remained was an oppressive, suffocating silence, punctuated only by the occasional groan of despair or the frantic scribbling of last-minute notes. The entire cafeteria felt like a funeral home. And for good reason. Tomorrow was Professor David's mid-semester exam. And no one was ready for it. 50 marks out of 80, someone muttered at the next table, their voice hollow with disbelief. 50. With 0 partial marking. How the hell is that fair? It's not, another voice snapped back. It's literally just him being a petty bastard. We all know it. I heard David actually laughed while setting this paper, a girl whispered, horrified. Like, full-blown villain laughter. You mean like this? Another student rasped before letting out a low, maniacal chuckle, only for a spoon to hit his face instantly. Read the damn notes instead of making jokes, you idiot. We're all dying here, someone from across the hall complained, as he did not seem amused at all for the disturbance. At another table, a guy sat hunched over his notebook, muttering equations like a prayer. At yet another, a girl had her head buried in her arms, groaning, I should have enrolled into the Clarence Military Academy instead. Why did I pick Rodova? Why? The entire room reeked of stress, desperation, and stamina potion abuse. And then, from the center of it all, bang. A loud slam echoed through the cafeteria as Su Yong snapped his textbook shut with so much force that even Leo flinched momentarily. Why am I even trying? Su Yong demanded, his voice filled with pure, unfiltered despair. His eyes, bloodshot from stress, darted toward Leo. There is no hope for us, Skyshard, he declared. No future. No light at the end of this hellish tunnel. Leo raised an eyebrow, speedily chewing his food. So you're saying you're going to fail? Mu Shen interjected at that moment, as Su Yong turned to face him. I have already failed. Su Yong shot back, jabbing a finger into his chest. Don't you understand, Shen? We're dead men walking. Me and Skyshard. Even if we get the answers right, David will mark them as wrong. Our failure is assured, Su Yong declared, as Leo let out a small hum of amusement. Bold of you to assume I'm failing too. Leo retorted, as Su Yong scoffed so hard it was almost insulting. Oh, please, he waved a hand dismissively. Let's not kid ourselves. You, my brother, are going down with me. Leo smirked, shaking his head slightly. I'll take you down with me next year too, Su Yong added darkly, leaning in, his voice almost conspiratorial now. If we both fail again, I say we burn this damn academy to the ground. Su Yong proposed, as Leo nearly choked on his food, not from panic, but from laughter. Cackle, no, no, hear me out, Su Yong whispered dramatically. It wouldn't even be that hard. We start small. A little explosion in the library. Some mild arson in the administration building. Then, when the chaos is at its peak, we slip out, unnoticed, free men once more. Su Yong proposed, as he seemed to have planned that more than having studied for the exam. Sure, Leo said, rolling his eyes, as although he agreed with Su Yong on the surface, internally, his mind was somewhere else entirely. Rodova Military Academy, Leo's dorm room. Later that night, Leo sat cross-legged on the floor, his breathing slow and steady as he meditated. But for once, his mind wasn't focused on the meditation itself, as it was instead focused on cheating. David's exam format was brutal. The strict grading system made passing nearly impossible. But if there was one thing Leo had learned in this world, it was that there was always a loophole. And Leo had found one. Jim Chu, the smartest student in the class, who David apparently adored. Chu came from a poor economic background and had made it to Rodova on scholarship. But unfortunately he was only a Grandmaster level talent, with not a very bright future. It was common knowledge that Chu was good at studies, and that he tried extra hard to please David in his class, which was why Leo believed that if anyone was going to pass this nightmare of a test, it was him. And with absolute vision nearing perfection, Leo could trace every single movement of Jim's pencil strokes in real time. He wouldn't even have to see the answers directly. He just needed to mimic the way Jim's hand moved, and he could copy every answer, without ever looking up from his own question paper, and without anyone being any wiser. It was a solution that he had thought of, in a spur-of-a-moment enlightenment in today's class. As with David finally allowing him to sit in class, Leo realized that he could perfectly mimic Jim Chu's note-making, if he used absolute vision. This was an absolute blessing for him, as he was the only individual in class being in a unique position to use his skills this way, as although the entire class had learnt perception skills, only his and Su Yang's absolute vision was advanced enough to precisely track something like pencil strokes in real time. The key factor in making this work was the fact that his cycle speed for absolute vision was just under 0.2 seconds, which was fast enough to keep up with real-time movements. If it was at basic mastery, and took over a second to cycle, then Leo would not be able to trace his writing, as he would miss connecting strokes between letters, and would never have a full trace. While lower-tier vision techniques simply wouldn't work, as peripheral vision right-pointing arrow only detected movement and couldn't trace. While full vision right-pointing arrow couldn't capture the finer hand motions needed for precise copying. Only absolute vision had the required precision. But even with this advantage, Leo wasn't an idiot. If he copied everything word for word, David would catch him immediately when checking his answer sheet, so instead, Leo knew that he needed to be smart about it. His plan: 1. Answer what he actually knew on his own. 2. Trace Jim's movements only for the hardest questions. 3. Paraphrase the answers slightly to avoid suspicion. It was risky for sure. But so was failing. And Leo had no intention of failing if he could pass. Rodova Military Academy, Exam Hall. The next morning, the atmosphere within the exam hall the next morning was pure oppression. Students shuffled on their seats, while looking pale-faced, sleep-deprived, and dead inside. Some clutched their notes like lifelines, flipping through them even as they walked. Others simply sat at their desks, staring at the front of the room like prisoners waiting for execution. Su Yang slumped into his seat beside Leo. "Leo," he whispered gravely. "Yeah, I've accepted my fate." Leo tilted his head. "Good for you, they say acceptance is the first step to moving on." "Yes," Su Yang nodded solemnly. "I've decided to imbue the virtues of a monk within me," he said, as Leo rolled his eyes. Then, the doors slammed shut. And a familiar presence walked in. Professor David. His expression was calm, his steps leisurely, and yet, his mere presence alone made the entire room tighten with fear. As he strolled to the front of the hall, he set the test papers down on the desk with a loud thud before surveying the room like a predator eyeing its prey. Then, after a pause, he smiled. "Shall we begin?" Rodova Military Academy, Exam Hall. Midterm examination begins. The moment David uttered those dreaded words, "Shall we begin?" a suffocating tension settled over the exam hall like a thick fog. Students hunched over their desks, gripping their pens with white-knuckled intensity, as if bracing for battle. The rustle of test papers being distributed was the only sound breaking the oppressive silence, followed by the slow, hesitant flipping of pages and the sharp scratches of pens desperately attempting to conquer the impossible. Then, the first groans of despair were heard. Soft, barely restrained sounds from students who had flipped to the first page and already knew they were doomed. And it was at this point that Leo finally received his exam sheet and turned it over. His eyes sweeping across the questions, scanning for familiar topics. And, just as he expected, David wasn't pulling any punches with this one. Question 1. Explain the fundamental principles behind mana convergence and dispersion during high-density spellcasting. 7 marks. Question 2. In what scenarios does metal-bending magic become less effective, and how can a mage compensate for these inefficiencies? 4 marks. Question 3. Calculate the mana consumption required to sustain a mid-tier defensive barrier for 3 minutes if the caster's peak mana capacity is 2200 units and his core operates at 62% efficiency. 3 marks. Leo nearly clicked his tongue in annoyance when he read the paper. David wasn't playing around. These weren't just theory questions, they were designed to be absolute nightmares. Even if someone knew the concepts, they still had to execute them perfectly to receive any marks, which made this paper very tough to pass, especially for students like him who had not attended most of his lectures and had to rely on external books to supplement their knowledge of the subject. However, despite how bad the paper looked, Leo identified at least 3 questions on the entire paper that he was confident of answering on his own, totaling 13 marks, which he began answering first, but just 15 minutes in, when he reached the truly brutal questions, the ones where a single misstep meant 0 marks, and he lacked full confidence in his answers, he didn't hesitate. Without a flicker of hesitation, he activated absolute vision, seamlessly shifting into his enhanced perception. And then, the real game began. Jim Chu sat 2 rows ahead, already furiously writing, completely in his element. Leo didn't need to see his paper. He just needed his hands. With absolute vision cycling at 0.2 seconds, Leo effortlessly traced Jim's pencil movements, mirroring every stroke down to the most minute details. His pen glided over the paper in sync, an echo of Jim's work, but with subtle modifications Leo made on the fly to avoid detection. And for the first half an hour, everything was going perfectly. Then, David moved. Leo felt it before he saw it. A subtle shift in the air. The quiet footsteps padding against the polished floor. Maybe David found it suspicious that he was writing non-stop. However, Leo did not glance over to look at him. Instead he relied on absolute vision to track his movement, as he felt the entire hall turn even more oppressive as if it had literally shrunk. As David passed beside students, they visibly tensed, their hands trembling ever so slightly as they avoided eye contact with the professor's looming figure. Leo, however, didn't stop writing. Didn't pause. Didn't hesitate. Because the key to cheating wasn't just being smart, it was acting like you weren't cheating at all. He kept his body loose. His breathing even. His gaze firmly locked onto his paper, never once flickering toward Jim Chu, or anyone else for that matter. And yet, David stopped right beside him, peering deeply into his paper, as he tried to apply extra psychological pressure on Leo. He was looking for any chits, any materials Leo might be using to cheat. However, despite the professor being beside him, Leo kept writing, as minutes started to tick by. Initially, Leo thought that David would start to move on after standing beside him for a couple minutes. However, David, ever the sadistic overseer, lingered there for far too long, longer than he had for anyone else, as he read every answer that Leo wrote, every stroke of pen that he made. David's eyes flicked between Leo's handwriting and his face, clearly searching for something. A tell, a crack, any sign of guilt. However, Leo gave him nothing. "You can stand there all day, old man, you still won't catch me lacking," Leo thought, as his hand remained steady and his movements controlled. "I see you're confident in your answers, Skyshard. You're writing awfully lot for someone who has not attended many lectures," David mused, as he tried to break Leo's rhythm. However, it did not work. With Monarch's indifference active, Leo's focus was absolute. He did not feel panicked, nor did his character break, as without missing a beat, he replied to David as if his words meant nothing to him. "It's not a difficult subject in the first place, Professor. I understood everything I needed to from the books at the library. I guess I didn't need to attend your lectures after all," Leo replied cockily, as David's face soured. Naturally, David wasn't amused with Leo's answer. However, there was nothing he could do about it for now, and hence after what felt like an eternity, David let out a soft hum and walked away, causing Leo's lips to curve up in the smallest of smirks. "Checkmate, asshole," Leo thought, as he continued to write at full speed. For the next 1 hour the test stretched on. Minutes blurred together as Leo continued his flawless execution, carefully balancing real answers with disguised copied ones. He paraphrased just enough, changed the structure just slightly, never once allowing an exact replica of Jim Chu's work to appear on his paper. As by the time the final 5 minutes were announced, Leo found himself already done with his answers, as he reviewed his sheet once again. For now, everything looked perfect. No suspicious patterns. No questionable word-for-word plagiarism. No obvious errors, as Leo seemed to have done a fine job copying. And it was at that moment that David walked to the front of the class, checking the clock. "All pens down," he announced, as a collective sigh of relief, mixed with dread, swept through the hall. Some students were visibly happy to get the test behind them, while the others were disappointed in having failed. Leo, belonging to the first group, leaned back with a smile, stretching his fingers. While Su-young, belonging to the second, clutched his head in despair as David collected his paper by snatching it from under his elbow. "You haven't even written half the sheet, Yang. What happened? Did not study enough," David mocked as he walked on, before arriving on Leo's desk, whose paper he collected without making any snarky comments. However, for the briefest moments as he collected Leo's paper, David paused to observe his answer sheet. And at that moment, Leo definitely felt it. The unspoken suspicion. A silent challenge. But Leo just smiled to himself, knowing there was no way he could be caught. "Nice try, Professor. But good luck proving I cheated," Leo thought, as no matter how much David doubted him, he wasn't catching him today. Rodova Military Academy, Faculty Staff Room, Professor David's cabin. The faculty staff room was eerily silent, save for the occasional scratch of quills against parchment and the low hum of the enchanted lamps overhead. At this late hour, most of the other professors had either finished their classwork preparation or abandoned the effort entirely, leaving their work for another day. But Professor David, he thrived in moments like these. There was something cathartic about grading exams, about holding the futures of his students in his hands, about determining who would pass and who would suffer that gave him a sadistic joy. It was his own little version of Judgment Day. And he enjoyed it, which was why, even though the clock was approaching midnight, he continued to grade the papers, relishing every mark that he deducted from the papers of the privileged big lineage students. Scratch with a practiced flick of his wrist, he flipped open the next paper, a Du family student's miserable attempt at passing his mid-semester exam, 48 marks. David's lips curled into a smirk as he reached the final question. If he were feeling merciful, he could find a way to award 3 extra marks for effort, perhaps in question 3, where the student's answer, while technically wrong, at least showed the right train of thought. However, David wasn't feeling merciful today, not towards the big family students at the least. Failing builds character, he mused, as with a single stroke of red ink, he marked the paper with a cruel 48/80ths, before scrawling a short, dispassionate comment. "You almost made it. Try harder next time." And with that, he tossed the paper onto the failures pile, with absolute satisfaction plastered all over his face. "On to the next," he declared, as he pulled the next paper from the stack, which just happened to be Su-young's paper. "Oh, it's my birthday come early," David said, reading the name on the paper, as his previous smirk widened into a full-fledged grin as he flipped it open. "Oh. That's wrong. That's wrong. That's ridiculously wrong. That's a poem," David said out loud, as he filled Su-young's paper with streaks of red and snarky comments. He had already expected that this was going to be fun based on Su-young's reaction while writing the answer sheet, however, he did not think it was going to be this fun. Final score 9/80ths. For a moment, David just stared at the paper, before letting out a slow, deliberate chuckle. Su-young had been so catastrophically bad that it almost amused him. The answers were horrifyingly wrong, riddled with contradictions, random guesses, and at one point, what looked like an attempt at poetry rather than an explanation of mana circulation. "Oh, I'm definitely bringing this paper to class tomorrow. To show the whole world that the battle genius Su-young is actually an idiot at studies. What did he say to me on day 1? Beware of your life outside these academy walls. Know your place." Well, I'll make sure his reputation as a stupid student in theory subjects becomes a topic that's discussed more than his battle prowess within the social circles," David said, as he tossed Su Yang's paper to a special pile, which he reserved for humiliating students. He could already picture it, the opening to tomorrow's class when he said, "Class, behold. The worst attempt at an exam I have ever graded. Ladies and gentlemen, Su Yang has achieved the impossible. He has become the first student in the history of Rodova to not even cross single digits in the midterm exams." As it was sure to be a delightful lecture, David continued his ruthless grading spree, handing out failures like a generous god of despair, as his red ink slashed through answer sheets with no mercy. A 12/80ths here, a 23/80ths there, a 42/80ths to a poor student, who came so close to passing, yet was still so far, as the failure pile continued to grow taller. And then, he reached it. Leo Skyshard's paper. As just grabbing that sheet, his smirk faded instantly, as just reading the name soured his mood. Crinkle David tightened his grip around the paper like it personally offended him, as if it were up to him, he would tear it apart without checking a single answer, but he knew that he could land into big trouble if he did that, which was why he showed restraint. Skyshard was writing the correct answers from what I glanced at the time, David muttered under his breath, as he flipped the paper open with an evident frown. I hope he fails as miserably as Su Yang, David prayed. However, as he read the first few answers, his expression only darkened further. Correct. The first answer was flawless, frustrating David, as he flipped to the next page, skimming through the neatly written responses. Correct. Next. Correct. Again. Correct. His brows furrowed deeply as page after page, answer after answer, Leo's test was coming back with 0 errors, causing his mood to plummet with every passing mark. Logically, it did not make sense to him, as it seemed to be simply impossible. David knew that Leo hadn't attended most of his lectures, yet some of the exact phrasing in his explanations, some of the precise wording he had used in class, had somehow made its way onto Leo's answer sheet. Not from textbooks, not from general knowledge, but from his own lectures. Which meant, Leo didn't just know the material. He knew exactly how David wanted it answered. And this surely couldn't be a coincidence. This had to be proof that Leo Skyshard had cheated. It's impossible that he got such detailed lecture notes from someone, and even if he had, it's still impossible to memorize them with such precision, David thought, flipping through the pages with increasing agitation, as frustration churned within him. He knew Leo had cheated. He just couldn't prove it. And that enraged him. For a fleeting moment, the temptation slithered into his mind. I could fail him regardless, just mark a few answers wrong. Who's going to stop me? But then, he knew exactly who would stop him. The ethics board. If Leo appealed the grading and accused him of unfair treatment, the academy would be forced to review the test objectively, and if they found that David had deliberately failed a student who had actually answered everything correctly, his reputation, his position, his career, it would all crumble in an instant, and David couldn't take such a risk. Gritting his teeth, David forced himself to continue grading accurately, his mood deteriorating with every correct answer he was forced to acknowledge, every mark he was compelled to add. And finally, 61/80ths. Leo achieved a passing grade. A high passing grade. And just writing that on his sheet made David feel sick to his stomach, as he just couldn't accept passing a student who had not even attended 20% of his total lectures. It wasn't right. It wasn't fair. Leo had definitely cheated. But, until he could prove it to the ethics board, it was simply not important. David's grip on the pen tightened as his gaze burned holes into the answer sheet, his thoughts racing, his blood boiling, as his mind screamed for an answer that refused to present itself. Fucking despicable cheater, I know you cheated somehow, I just don't know how. His fingers curled so tightly around his pen that the wood snapped in half. However, despite all his frustrations, he had nothing that could tie Leo down to a crime for now. However, David still refused to let the matter rest, as internally he began thinking of all possible ways Leo could have cheated, determined to sniff his fraud out. The next day, near the Rodova Military Academy notice board, if there was anyone more devastated than David to see Leo score 61/80ths in basics of magic theory, it was Su Yang. Standing before the massive notice board, his eyes darting between his own 9/80ths and Leo's 61/80ths, as he looked like a man who had just watched his best friend ascend to godhood while he remained a mere mortal, trapped in the cruel reality of academic failure. His fingers trembled as he pointed at Leo's name. Then at his own. Then back at Leo's. And then, with the tragic flair of a betrayed war hero, he clutched his chest as if he'd just been run through with a sword. Skyshard. You absolute traitor. Su Yang gasped, turning on Leo with the raw betrayal of a man left to die on the battlefield. Leo, who had been casually munching on an apple he had just picked on his way out of the mess hall, barely spared him a glance as he muttered, "Huh." Up until now, Leo had been lost in thought, wondering just how furious David must have been while grading his paper, completely forgetting about Su Yang's impending academic meltdown. "You passed," Su Yang demanded, grabbing Leo by the shoulders as if shaking him would somehow undo the horror he had just witnessed. Yeah," Leo replied, unfazed. "You passed," Su Yang repeated, shaking him even harder now, as if sheer disbelief alone could rewrite reality. Leo narrowed his eyes. "Is that a question, or are you trying to exorcise me?" "How?" Su Yang staggered backward, his hands gripping at the air as if searching for something, anything, to hold onto for support. You lied to me," he accused, his voice cracking with the weight of betrayal. "I thought we were in this together. We were supposed to fail together, Skyshard." Leo smirked. "I don't remember signing that contract." "You don't need a contract for brotherhood," Su Yang roared, drawing the attention of several confused students nearby. "I was supposed to be grieving with you today. Drowning in misery. Burning this godforsaken academy to the ground. But no, you had to go and be an academic genius all of a sudden." Leo raised an eyebrow, barely suppressing his amusement. Then, in a conspiratorial whisper, he leaned in. "I cheated." Silence. Su Yang, mid-rant, froze. His brain took a solid second to process what he had just heard. Then, narrowing his eyes suspiciously, he asked, "Did you actually?" Leo shrugged, nonchalantly taking another bite of his apple. "Maybe." As listening to that response, Su Yang gasped so dramatically that even the nearby students flinched. "You son of a," Su Yang began, but before he could finish his sentence, Mu Shen, who had been silently enjoying the show from the sidelines, finally decided to intervene. "Yang, buddy, you do realize your failure isn't Leo's fault, right?" Mu Shen said dryly, as Su Yang immediately whirled on him with the speed of a man personally wronged. "Excuse me," Mu Shen sighed, rubbing his temples. "Maybe, just maybe, if you had spent more time studying instead of training at the combat arena, you wouldn't be in this situation today." "Blasphemy," Su Yang snapped, dramatically pointing a finger at Mu Shen as if condemning him in a courtroom. "I was preparing for the inevitable failure, Shen. I was making peace with my fate. Unlike some people," he whipped back around to glare at Leo, who decided to go behind my back and actually pass. Leo took another lazy bite of his apple. "Would it make you feel better if I said I barely passed?" Su Yang narrowed his eyes. Then, slowly, shook his head in bitter disappointment. "No, because you still passed. And now, I must mourn alone." With that, Su Yang collapsed onto a nearby bench, draping himself across it like a tragic hero who had lost everything, as Leo and Mu Shen exchanged humored glances. "Think he's gonna be okay?" Mu Shen asked, as Leo took another bite of his apple before replying smoothly, "Yeah, he'll be fine. He just needs a few hours to accept that I'm superior." Betrayal. Su Yang's anguished scream echoed through the academy grounds, causing several students to turn their heads, only for Leo and Mu Shen to burst into laughter. In life, failing exams felt painful, however, failing exams when your best friend passed, felt even worse. That same night, Leo's dorm room, the quiet hum of mana filled the dimly lit room as Leo sat cross-legged on the floor, his breathing slow and controlled, his mind sharper than ever. Fresh out of meditation, his body felt lighter, his senses heightened, as he transitioned seamlessly into his nightly routine of pushing absolute vision towards perfection. At first, tonight felt no different from the countless nights before. But then, something shifted. It wasn't a dramatic burst of energy. Nor was it a surge of power crashing through his veins. It was something subtle, so subtle that Leo almost missed it. A tiny, almost imperceptible refinement. A flicker of change that, at first, seemed insignificant. Until he realized, his cycle speed had dropped because of it, to just about 0.1 seconds. Holy shit, I'm on the cusp of a breakthrough, Leo realized, as on the very next attempt, 0.09. The cycle time dropped even more, causing Leo's breath to still, as the realization finally hit him. He had done it. After weeks of relentless training, of pushing his mind and body to their absolute limits, refining his mana circulation, and using the skill in countless high-pressure scenarios, absolute vision had finally reached perfection. His heart pounded, not from excitement, but from realization. This wasn't just the result of mechanical repetition. This was because of real, practical usage. All those fights against Grandmasters. All those battles where he had relied on split-second reactions. All those times he had used it in combat, tracking movements, predicting attacks, and even the moments he had used it while cheating yesterday. All of it had pushed the skill past its final threshold. Leo exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders as he activated absolute vision once more, and this time, it was different. It didn't feel like an activation. It didn't feel like a technique he had to consciously trigger anymore. It was effortless. Like flexing a muscle he had used 1,000 times before. There was no lag, no deliberate thought, no strain. His surroundings sharpened automatically, his awareness expanding as naturally as breathing, as instinctively as blinking. Absolute vision was no longer just a skill he had to execute. It was a part of him. A seamless, subconscious ability, woven into his very instincts, ready to be called upon at any moment. As Leo finally seemed to have mastered 2 of the 5 skills he needed to become a Grandmaster. Ha, ha ha, Leo chuckled, allowing himself a moment of joy, before Monarch's indifference made him stable once again, as he smiled with his eyes closed. Mastering absolute vision meant that he could now solely focus on improving his combat skills, as the 3 remaining skills for him to master were all practical combat skills that could only be improved on the battlefield. Tomorrow onwards, I shall be on the combat training grounds whenever I'm not in class or meditating, Leo concluded, as he resolved to craft a new schedule for himself starting tomorrow, where his skill training time could be maximized. Rodova Military Academy, practical combat grounds. Over the next week, Leo settled into a steady rhythm, focusing entirely on building his new fighting style. As he began blending his recently acquired skills with his existing techniques, slowly crafting a style that felt both natural and effective. Having lost all memory of his previous combat form, Leo lacked confidence when facing unfamiliar opponents, as he couldn't clearly gauge his own strengths or weaknesses. However, the more matches he fought and the more experience he gained, the more his instincts began to resurface, as with every bout, his footing grew steadier and his confidence slowly returned. He once again began to understand the limitations of his existing core move set, and more importantly, the best ways to apply them practically in combat. While he had, at one point, considered his previous skills to be borderline useless, the truth was far from it. The truth was that techniques like Vanish, Mirror World, and Shadow Bind were far from ineffective under the right circumstances. However, they simply weren't well suited for his current opponents. The skills themselves weren't weak. In fact, against Grandmaster tier beasts, or an opponent that was not proficient in spotting illusions, they could be devastating. As he could easily use Vanish to slip through their guard undetected, or deploy clones through Mirror World to create confusion, and then capitalize with Kill Strike to land a finishing blow. However, all this was only useful against instinct-driven creatures with low perception, and not against Rodova students and teachers, because here in Rodova, perception was a mandatory subject and every student was trained to spot deception, which made these tricks lose their unique edge. The value of Mirror World was not in the increased number of bodies that were created with him spreading his mana thin, but rather in the fact that all his clones looked, spoke and moved exactly like him, to create an illusion of there being hundreds of him, as without that, Mirror World was no different from the multi-clone skill, which created completely black humanoid duplicates of an individual, which could gang up on an opponent but did not look the same. However, that did not diminish the value of the skills themselves, it just meant that the circuits weren't the right stage to showcase them. As while the same skills would prove extremely useful against one type of opponent, they might not be as useful against another, which was why Leo had to upgrade his old move set with his newly learned skills, while also finding creative ways to keep his old ones relevant. Because when layered together and used creatively, even these, less effective, skills could create decisive openings, and in a close match, that edge could be the difference between victory and defeat. One of the two new skills Leo had picked up was Celestial Veil, a much-needed defensive addition to his existing move set, offering the kind of full-body protection he had sorely lacked until now. At its current basic mastery, the skill took just over 1 second to activate, and with its total duration lasting only 1.2 seconds, Leo had to time it with near-perfect precision to get any real value from it. Ideally, he had chosen the move for spontaneous defense in combat, something he could trigger instinctively in moments of danger to block an incoming attack. But in practice, it was still far from battle-ready. Because not only was it nearly impossible to predict an opponent's strike a full second in advance, but the skill's mana cost was absurdly high. At 25% of his total mana pool for a single activation, even one failed attempt would leave him heavily drained and vulnerable. So while the skill had incredible potential, Leo knew it would take time, training, and improved mastery before it became the reactive shield he envisioned. However, while he was still struggling with the move's activation timing, its defensive efficiency was undeniably powerful. Capable of nullifying both physical and magical attacks, regardless of which body part was targeted, the skill's utility in real combat was unquestionable. At its core, the technique worked by enveloping the user's entire body in a dense layer of mana, functioning almost like a layer of transparent, bulletproof glass that lasted for exactly 1.2 seconds. During this window, any incoming strike, be it a blade, spell, or projectile, would collide against the mana veil first, where the impact was rapidly dispersed across multiple sublayers of mana that evenly distributed the force throughout the body, neutralizing damage and preventing critical injury. As after testing it several times against even Major Hen's strongest attack, Leo realized it was practically invincible at the Grandmaster tier. As none of his opponents could even scratch him with that skill active, no matter how much force they applied, essentially giving him absolute immunity during the skill active period. The challenge for him now was to slowly master the move, getting the activation time down to under 0.1 seconds at perfect mastery, which would then open a whole new horizon of combat style for him, where he could stay close and take more risks, without being afraid to take hits. Finally, on the offensive front, 1000 Phantom Strikes was a move that completely changed the tempo of Leo's combat. Unlike traditional chain strike techniques that relied on pure speed and stamina, this skill overloaded the opponent's senses. Every strike he threw while it was active appeared to be 10, sometimes 20. Not only because the skill gave him a temporary burst of speed, changing the tempo from his strikes, but because the layered illusion blurred the line between reality and falsehood. Whenever he activated the move, his figure blurred, and ghostly afterimages rippled outward with every attack. To an untrained eye, it looked like Leo was striking from 5 different angles at once, and even for trained fighters, it became nearly impossible to distinguish which blade was real and which was phantom. And that sensory overload, it created hesitation. Hesitation on where exactly to block, how exactly to counter, and that hesitation led to panic. And panic led to openings. Combined with his speed and ability to reposition using blade switch, 1000 Phantom Strikes became a nightmare to counter. It wasn't just about hitting hard, it was about creating chaos. And Leo thrived in chaos. Against straightforward opponents, it forced them into defensive shells, overwhelmed by the barrage of seemingly endless slashes. Against more technical fighters, it messed with their timing, making counters nearly impossible. Even Major Hen had raised an eyebrow the first time Leo used it against him, and that was when Leo knew he'd made the right choices. Although the skill was still at basic mastery, the potential it held was undeniably immense. As Leo's mana control improved, so would the fluidity and realism of his afterimages, and eventually, he'd reach a point where even Monarch-level fighters would have trouble predicting his movements. And that was the ultimate goal. To evolve beyond raw strength or flashy magic. To become the kind of fighter who was unreadable, unpredictable, untouchable. And so, with Celestial Veil as his unbreakable shield, Thousand Phantom Strikes as his chaos engine, and Absolute Vision as his ever-present awareness, Leo finally began to shape a fighting style that was his and his alone. A style worthy of a Monarch-tier talent. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And please support the author by link in description. Rodova Military Academy. 2 months later, after the challenging first mid-semester exam in Basics of Magic Theory, the rest of the exams proved significantly easier for Leo to handle. In physical training, he was already miles ahead of his peers, and when evaluated under the same grading lens, he naturally secured a perfect score. In practical combat, he stood shoulder to shoulder with Su Yang as one of the strongest fighters in the first-year class, once again earning the highest possible grade without much difficulty. In Basics of Perception, his perfect mastery of Absolute Vision made the entire course feel like cakewalk, as he breezed through assessments that left others fumbling. Stealth and planning posed no threat either, as his instincts, discipline, and natural talent allowed him to pass with flying colors. And in Basics of Assassination, a subject where many struggled to find footing, Leo thrived, his precision, fondness of learning about poisons, and natural killer instinct shining through, as he secured yet another excellent mark. Hence, with all his subjects handled and his academic footing solidified, Leo was finally free to focus entirely on what truly mattered to him, his training. And for the next 60 days, that was all he did. Leo trained like a man possessed, reshaping his body, refining his instincts and sharpening his mind, as he transformed himself into something far more dangerous than what he had been before. Because it wasn't just the skills he was mastering, or the countless hours poured into the combat grounds. It was the atmosphere itself, the pressure, the rivalry, the pace of Rodova, that pushed him to evolve beyond his limits. And evolve, he did. Absolute Vision had long since become a part of his subconscious. A permanent layer in his awareness, always active, always running. As one part of his mind remained solely dedicated to maintaining the skill, filtering through the sensory information of his surroundings in a never-ending loop, that allowed him to monitor every blind spot without thinking. But what surprised him most, was what he began doing with his actual eyes. As what happened next wasn't something that Leo had consciously planned or trained for. But after weeks of fighting against Grandmaster-tier opponents and getting repeatedly pummeled, knocked flat, and outpaced, his instincts began to adapt in subtle ways that his conscious mind only later caught onto. As he started to subconsciously watch for patterns. Patterns like the way an opponent's shoulder tensed before a punch, the twist of their ankle before a kick, the smallest twitch in their fingers before they cast a spell. It was never a full motion, just a contraction of muscle, a shift in stance, a whisper of movement that gave away what was coming next. And although it all happened in the span of just a few microseconds, that was all Leo needed to predict what was coming next. His brain, now trained to split its focus, allowed Absolute Vision to monitor his surroundings for attacks and any big movements. While his real eyes focused purely on reading his opponent's body, giving him a reaction window that, while tiny, was often the difference between taking a hit and slipping past it, as his real eyes only focused on the muscle contractions on his opponent's body. Telltale signs such as the direction their pupils were gazing in, the extent their biceps were contracted at, and the tension in their ankles. This was all that Leo monitored constantly using his actual eyes, as he tried to stay one step ahead of his opponent whenever he could. Unfortunately, it wasn't a perfect system yet, as he often made mistakes in his reading of what that muscle movement meant. However, they were mistakes he undoubtedly learned from, each one sharpening him further, as every subsequent fight brought him closer to becoming untouchable against opponents within the same tier. With his superior speed and reflexes already giving him an edge, the added ability to predict his enemy's movements made him borderline impossible to hit. And this phenomenon was evident in his recent spars with Su Yang, who, despite advancing rapidly in his own craft, now struggled to land even a single clean blow on him. At the same time, over the last 60 days, Leo's training with Celestial Veil had become the most grueling and expensive part of his daily schedule, as every afternoon after class, he would beg Professor Hen, Mian Fei, or even Mu Shen to attack him with live spells or high-speed projectiles, forcing him to activate the shield at the exact right moment to block the incoming hit. It was frustrating, painful, and completely draining, as with every failed attempt, not only was he left brutally bruised and injured, but it also left him costing 25% of his mana pool, as Leo burned through 4 dozen mana potion bottles a day, drawing more than a few concerned glances from the Academy supply staff who were worried about the expense his training cost the Academy. But the pain and the expense were worth it, because after 2 months of this brutal regimen, he broke through. Celestial Veil finally reached advanced mastery, as his understanding of the technique sharpened through repeated use. And it was at this stage that everything changed. The activation time dropped to just 0.3 seconds, quick enough to deploy mid-fight, quick enough to save his life even in close quarters, as he finally began weaving the skill seamlessly into real combat and not just drills. The mana cost, too, dropped from a crippling 25% to a far more manageable 10%, making it viable to use not once, but multiple times across a drawn-out fight without completely draining his reserves. Where once the skill felt like a gamble, an expensive shield he prayed would trigger in time, it had now become a reliable, instinctual part of his arsenal. As he no longer hoped it would activate, but rather confidently knew that it would. And that certainty transformed everything. He could now afford to take risks, to charge in, to press harder, to walk into danger without flinching. Because for 1.2 full seconds, Leo wasn't just defending. He was simply invincible. Finally, and perhaps inevitably, the most noticeable leap came in his offense. 1,000 Phantom Strikes, once a flashy but slightly clumsy skill, had evolved into a legitimate nightmare to defend against. As after 2 months of relentless use and refinement, Leo had finally pushed the technique to advanced mastery. Gone were the flickering, transparent illusions that once betrayed the move's mechanics. Now, they looked real. With every step, ghostly afterimages peeled off from his body, scattering in every direction like echoes in motion. With every swing, a dozen phantom blades mirrored the real one, each strike timed with surgical precision to overload his opponent's perception. As the skill no longer looked just fast. It was elegant, fluid, deadly. Even Major Hen began misreading the attacks during their spars, slipping up in ways he never had before, creating rare openings that Leo could now regularly exploit, landing clean, undeniable blows against someone who once toyed with him. Because once the afterimages took hold, it became nearly impossible to tell where the real Leo was, or which blade was going to land. And when paired with Blade Switch, which allowed him to reposition through spatial gaps at will, Leo became a blur of motion and illusion. An unpredictable force of chaos that no opponent could easily anticipate, let alone pin down. Rodova Military Academy, Practical Combat Arena, 50 days. There's only 50 days left until the final circuit selection begins. Major Hen's voice echoed across the arena, sharp and charged with urgency, as he blocked a lightning-fast strike aimed at his left knee. Minerva has already reached the Grandmaster realm. That's 2 of the 5 main circuit team spots already locked down. So unless you want to be one of the rotation members, step up your game, Skyshard. Leo didn't respond. He couldn't. His body was in constant motion, ducking, weaving, striking, with a level of precision that demanded every ounce of focus. Hen grunted as he parried another slash, sidestepping a follow-up feint, as his brows furrowed slightly in surprise when he noticed Leo's improved speed and strength. This wasn't the same kid he sparred 3.5 months ago. No, this was someone entirely different. His growth speed is monstrous, Hen thought, narrowing his eyes as Leo adjusted mid-combo, slipping past his reach with fluid footwork and economy of movement. What takes most talented students at least 3 months to learn, he picks up in under a week, and the bastard never even repeats the same mistake twice, Hen added, jabbing forward as flash. Leo's body shifted, not in the panicked, awkward recoil he used to rely on, where he'd bend backward and lose his balance, but with a clean hip rotation and a precise step into Hen's blind spot, which minimized motion while maximizing positioning. Clean transition. Hen thought, as he appreciated Leo's growth, as the old Leo would have instinctively tucked in his stomach and retreated with a clumsy hop backward, effective at avoiding damage, but disastrous when it came to follow-ups. But this Leo, he dodged with control, as he had clearly learned the importance of never falling into defensive postures that left him vulnerable to the next move. This kid is going to dominate the circuits, his fundamentals are just too strong, Hen thought, as even in the middle of battle, he couldn't help but appreciate the precision of Leo's style. Out of the countless students Hen had trained, very few showed this kind of progress, none, perhaps, as complete and refined as Leo. Because Leo didn't waste movement. He fought with purpose. Every step, every strike, every breath, connected seamlessly to the next, as if part of a grand design. Take this, Hen barked, shifting momentum with a low kick aimed at Leo's shin. But instead of jumping back or blocking, Leo activated blade switch, flickering several meters to the side, leaving a ghosted afterimage still mid-motion in his place. There it is again, that damn combo. The illusions from 1,000 phantom strikes were already difficult to track on their own, but when layered with blade switch and parallel processing, it was like fighting a phantom made of static and shadow. Hen could feel the dissonance hit his senses. He was reading 5 different Leos at once, as even his Grandmaster tier perception scrambled for clarity. Swoosh! A blade suddenly came from the right, and Hen spun with speed to parry, only to realize it wasn't real. It was a fake dagger thrown by a clone. A distraction from using Mirror World. Because the real strike came from the left. Clang! Hen's blade deflected the true attack just in time, his heart skipping a beat from the close call, only for Leo to surge in again, his strikes crashing like waves, relentless and overlapping in rhythm. But Hen wasn't a rookie. He pivoted and countered with a heavy elbow aimed straight for Leo's ribs. Thud! His strike met resistance. An invisible wall of force, celestial veil. Thunk! Hen's elbow bounced harmlessly off, as pain shot up his arm from the impact. He grimaced. Celestial veil, huh? The kid baited me into that. Only now did Hen realize that Leo had deliberately left his abdomen exposed, not because he forgot to guard, but to invite a counter. And it worked. Cheeky, Hen couldn't help but smirk as he skidded back to create distance. That invisible barrier, he'd clashed with it dozens of times before. But now, it triggered faster. Smoother and just a breath before impact. 0.3 seconds to activate the move. That's not novice timing anymore. That's battlefield timing, Hen thought, as he realigned into another defensive stance while Leo lunged forward again. And while Hen did not exactly feel under threat, he couldn't dismiss this fight either. Leo still lacked the raw strength to pressure a Grandmaster to fear for their life in a direct clash, but he had reached a point where any lapse in focus could earn Hen a cut, a bruise, or a genuine injury. And for Hen, that alone was reason enough to stay fully locked in. This kid's a damn monster in the making, he concluded, before finally deciding to end the spar with a precise combo, a sharp elbow to Leo's jaw, followed by a heavy kick to the chest. As Leo was sent flying across the practice arena. Thud Leo skidded to a halt, breathing heavily on the floor, as Hen secretly wiped a couple drops of sweat that had appeared on his forehead, 17 minutes and 55 seconds. That's how long Leo had lasted today against Hen, and considering there was still a tier difference between them, that number alone spoke volumes. Marvin, you bastard. Just how hard have you been training these boys to have developed such monstrous stamina within them? To be able to go toe-to-toe against me at full blast for 17 minutes and 55 seconds. The endurance on this kid is beyond normal, Hen thought, as he dropped his weapon and ran his hands through his hair, to make sure he still looked good. Alright, that's enough for the day, Skyshard, you and Yang have to take your 4th genetic awakening shot today. Rest and clean up a bit. Yang, you stupid idiot, how many times have I told you to not spar while wearing that ridiculous 150 kg vest? You're not Goku. Stop that nonsense now. Hen screamed, as after instructing Leo to take it slow, he admonished Su Yang to be sparring while wearing that vest, as it could easily lead to slipped discs or other muscular injuries. Rodova Military Academy, Genetic Awakening Chamber. Major Hen led Leo and Su Yang down the sterile, highly secure corridor with his usual casual swagger, as the hall full of guards let the pass with silent nods. Hiss, asterisk. The chamber door opened after accepting Hen's biometrics, as the trio stepped into the awakening chamber that was eerily silent except for the soft humming noise of the neural pods running in the corner. By now, this routine had become familiar to them, and hence neither Leo nor Su Yang asked any questions as they arrived, their expressions calm and unreadable, as they each moved toward their designated pods without needing any instruction, while Hen remained just outside, arms folded and gaze sharp, watching over them like a hawk. The neural ports embedded in the sleek interior of the injection pods responded automatically to their presence, as delicate metallic tendrils extended from the inner walls and attached themselves to the back of their necks with practiced precision, syncing with their nervous systems in preparation for the shot. Within moments, the chamber doors slid open, as with a hiss, as 2 military-grade medics stepped in, stoic and efficient, each carrying a gleaming black case that housed the 4th genetic awakening shot. Hen offered them both a nod, his tone clipped but firm. Make sure the dosage is exact. If you mess this one up, even your great-great ancestors won't be able to save your licenses. Hen warned. However, the doctors did not flinch. This was not their first rodeo, and they were very experienced in their fields, which made tasks like administering a simple shot not even a slight challenge. Sigh asterisk. Leo let out a long, steady breath as the injector arm locked into place, and the pod interior flooded with the familiar pale blue stasis gas that would protect his body during the adaptation process. He had gone through this 3 times already, and while the burning sensation that followed the shot was never pleasant, it was something he had come to accept. Shot, asterisk. As the serum plunged into his system, he closed his eyes. And waited. And as always, the pain came first, crawling across his chest and burrowing into his limbs like fire eating away at flesh, as his blood boiled and his muscles twitched. But he didn't move. He couldn't. The pod held him in place, as nutrient injections and internal oxygen flow maintained his vitals at peak condition, while the neural interface ensured that his body entered an optimal metabolic state for the serum to take effect. At this moment, Leo thought about how the 3rd awakening yielded almost nothing of note, just a minor enhancement to his muscular responsiveness, which made him slightly more agile in close-range fights. Meanwhile, Su Yang had unlocked a powerful new technique that he hadn't stopped bragging about for weeks. So naturally, this time, Leo's expectations were high. And this time, it came. A surge, violent and absolute, as his head jerked slightly back and his breath got caught in his throat, as his mind was suddenly flooded by a tsunami of information. He didn't understand it at first. Not all of it. But the name of the technique floated up almost immediately, and that alone made him feel slightly confused. Ball Buster. For a split second, he thought it was a joke. A glitch in the bloodline. Some kind of absurd prank left by one of his ancestors who renamed a terrifying dagger skill as Ball Buster. But no. As the data poured in, more vivid and horrifying by the second, Leo realized this was no joke. This was real. It was an actual ball-bursting technique crafted by one of his ancestors, sealed within his bloodline and now forced into his hands. At first, he felt something close to curiosity. Then horror. And then, extreme embarrassment. As despite Monarch's indifference working overtime to keep his mind composed, Leo felt his cheeks flush red as the details of the technique began to slot into place within his head. What the hell kind of sick bastard came up with this move? He thought, as a sharp pang of secondhand shame hit him like a truck. Because the technique, despite its crude name, was disturbingly efficient. Initially developed as a torture technique in ancient blood wars, Ball Buster was a skill that targeted the most sensitive regions of the human body with surgical cruelty. For men, it focused on the testicles, specifically, the fine network of nerves, blood vessels, and mana channels in the scrotum. The technique involved placing one's palm over the target area and releasing a finely tuned burst of mana, laced with vibrational shockwaves that shattered capillaries, ruptured nerves, and collapsed the inner tissue structure, effectively turning the organ into an unusable lump of pain and trauma. And the worst part was that it wasn't just physically agonizing, no, because it actually rendered healing spells almost useless, as the damage spread in a radial pattern designed to evade common regeneration techniques. As even with high-level medical intervention, there was always some form of permanent damage left behind. Which made Leo shudder just thinking about it. And while it was cruel on men, it was no less cruel for women, as the technique targeted the chest of the women, specifically, the fatty and glandular tissues that formed the breasts. As with just a 5-second long contact infused with mana compression, Ball Buster deflated them entirely, reducing their volume to flat muscle and leaving behind a painful, tender scar that echoed for weeks. What kind of ancestor creates this and thinks, yes, this is my legacy? Leo groaned internally, burying his face in his hands, at least, metaphorically, as the pod held his arms firmly in place. And worst of all, it worked. It was effective. Horrifyingly so. It bypassed armor. Ignored mana barriers. The technique was so invasive and brutal that even if it didn't kill the target, it almost always rendered them completely incapable of continuing the fight. But even with all that power, Leo couldn't bring himself to accept it. Absolutely not. I will never use this. He resolved internally, not because he wanted to keep it a secret weapon. Not because he wanted to save it for a desperate moment. But simply because he was far too ashamed to ever be seen using it. I don't want to be known in the universe as Leo Skyshard, the weirdo who attacks the genitals. Also, such weird fetishes never end well. What goes around, comes around, so if I do end up busting someone's balls, I'm sure they will become obsessed with me and come to chop my dick off at some point of my life. Leo thought, as he rejected the idea of ever using this move in his life. Pervert. The ancestor was definitely a pervert, he muttered to himself. As for the first time ever, Leo found himself praying that no one would ever ask him what skill he unlocked during this awakening, as he would simply feel too embarrassed to even talk about it. What do I even say? Do I admit I learned a move that turns men into eunuchs and women into flat-chested Amazons? Leo wondered, as he re-swore to keep this one buried deep within his own memories. Rodova Military Academy, Genetic Awakening Chamber. Major Hen stood in front of the two pods, arms crossed as he paced idly around the chamber. His boots echoed lightly against the reinforced floor, as real-time neural data from each pod streamed across the data slate in his hands. He did not expect anything too dramatic this time. Not after the third shot had already begun to show diminishing returns. But he still kept an eye on the numbers, as watching these two freakishly talented kids go through their transformation had become an oddly entertaining affair for him. Leo's vitals were stable, heart rate slightly elevated, oxygen absorption optimal. And yet, Hen frowned as he scrolled through the biometric results. There was no major growth spurt. No noticeable changes to skeletal density. No muscle mass spike, not even a hint of physical restructuring. If anything, the only improvement came in the form of a marginal 3% increase in mana circulation capacity, hardly worth reporting if this were any other student. And yet, the neural scan of his brain showed significant activity. About 10 minutes into the session, there was a sudden spike in brain activity, especially in the prefrontal cortex and deep memory zones, as Hen raised an eyebrow and tilted the slate sideways to confirm he wasn't misreading. Huh, well that's definitely a skill unlock, he muttered, watching the readings climb and level out as Leo's brain entered full data assimilation. Bloody hell, I wonder what kind of move he's unlocking this time, Hen thought, his lips twitching into a conflicted smirk. Because while a part of him felt genuinely happy that Leo had inherited another bloodline skill, another step toward unlocking his full potential, there was also that small, quiet voice of a seasoned fighter in his head whispering, what if you're the one who has to deal with that move during training? As the thought made Hen chuckle dryly to himself. He almost couldn't believe that he had started to feel worried about a kid's growth. But it just went to show how quickly Leo had evolved in just 4 shots, as sparring with him had already gone from playful to slightly annoying, to stay focused or you'll get stabbed, for Hen. What about Yang? He muttered at that point, as swiping on the slate, he changed the screen to one that displayed Su Yang's data. Sus results were more straightforward. No neural spike, no sudden skill acquisition, but there was an improvement in the constitution. Muscle distribution around the joints had shifted slightly, especially around the knees, ankles, and shoulders, forming additional micro-muscle groups designed for more explosive acceleration. His tendons were denser too, likely to support sharper pivots and bursts of movement. But beyond that, nothing major. There were no flashy skill unlocks. No mana circulation breakthroughs. Just small, methodical improvements that wouldn't have been noticeable without precision tools in the first place. Sigh, asterisk reading the data made Hen exhale through his nose, as he dragged a hand through his hair. So they're plateauing, he thought. Not in a bad way, but in the sense that the initial fireworks of the first few awakening shots had clearly dimmed. The 4th shot, as expected, wasn't the game changer the first 2 had been. As no matter how talented the candidate, the body could only process so much foreign enhancement at a time, which was why the Academy never registered the 5th and final shot until the end of the semester, as they saved it till the end for maximum impact. The 5th dose was kind of like a super boost, as it was a shot 5 times stronger than the rest, designed to push candidates to their genetic limit in one last explosive surge. But even with the diminishing returns now showing, Leo and Su Yang had already surpassed what most students accomplished in a year. Across the board, they were faster, stronger, sharper. Their mana circulation, their natural attributes, their combat instincts, everything had grown at a pace that was simply not normal. As while they had both entered the academy with similar baselines to the other elite students like Mu Shen, but now they were on an entirely different tier, having already become stronger than most second years. More composed, and already more dangerous. So this is the legendary growth rate of Monarch tier talents, Hen thought, as he slowly nodded to himself, finally understanding why Ulrich had only ever cared about these 2 since the beginning. It makes sense now, Hen realized, as he finally saw Ulrich's vision in full. Even if Rodova failed to win the circuits this year, if trained properly, Leo and Su Yang could win it alone for Rodova next year. Which was why Rodova needed to treat them like the supreme gems that they were, without question. HSSSS. Asterisk at this point, the first pod hissed open as a cloud of nutrient gas spilled into the chamber, forcing Hen to turn his gaze toward Su Yang, who groaned lightly as he tried to sit up, drenched in sweat. Easy Yang, let me help you, Hen said, moving forward as he caught Su Yang under the arm, and eased him onto his feet. Easy, Yang. There's no need to behave like Skyshard. He might be a freak who doesn't need support after genetic shots, but you do, Hen muttered, shaking his head at Su Yang's attempts to break free of his support, as he guided Su toward the recovery room. Moments later, the second pod hissed open. And Leo stepped out of it with an oddly flushed face, which made Hen feel confused. Why the hell do you look like you just lost your virginity and were caught in the act by your father? Hen asked, but Leo refused to respond. He was never talking about what he experienced in the pod to anyone, and hence after letting out a deep sigh, he began walking towards the recovery room, deliberately avoiding eye contact with Hen, who followed him closely with curiosity. Did he just accidentally let out a load or something? Hen wondered, as he peeked towards Leo's military robes to see if there was any hint of semen leakage, but nothing of the sort seemed to have occurred, as Hen double-checked with his data slate. Huh. Weird, Hen concluded in the end, as he shrugged it off and instructed the boys to rest and sip on potions until the doctors cleared them to return to their dorms. Rodova Military Academy, physical training grounds. There was a noticeable shift in the atmosphere among the first-year students after receiving their fourth genetic awakening shot, as the race toward the circuit selection officially began. With no other major events scheduled between now and the start of the selections, every student seemed to enter a hyper-focused clutch mode, pushing themselves harder than ever in the hopes of squeezing out every bit of improvement possible in the 7 weeks remaining till the selection day. Lately, whispers had been circulating across the class, rumors that Su Yong was on the verge of becoming a Grandmaster tier fighter. Having already fulfilled the physical, mental, and skill requirements for a breakthrough, he now only needed to raise his mana concentration to the threshold, with most expecting his advancement to occur sometime within the next 2 weeks. And it was this unexpectedly rapid timeline that sent ripples through the rest of the class, as murmurs of disbelief, anxiety, and awe grew louder by the day. He's going to break through. I'm telling you, within the next 2 weeks, Su Yang's becoming a Grandmaster. Oof, a Grandmaster in just 5 months of joining the academy. That's insane. Meanwhile, most of our second-year seniors are still crawling at Master tier, barely making progress. With even the more talented ones yet to make a breakthrough. It's insane. Just thinking about it makes me want to throw up. I mean, I've been working my ass off since day 1, and I'm still stuck trying to stabilize my mana flow. Let alone reaching the Grandmaster tier as a first year, I'll be lucky to reach it 2 years after graduation. Yeah, the difference in talents is just insane. And borderline unfair. What takes as years as possible for them in months? Sigh, it was always my dream to make it to the circuits. Ever since I was a kid, I used to watch those broadcasted fights with my dad and swear I'd be on that stage one day. Because that's where you get your first real shot at money and fame. That's where the elite notice you. The best weaponsmiths want to make custom weapons for you. The best gearsmiths want to make custom body armor for you. The best business conglomerates want to sponsor your career. And organizations like the 6 big clans or the best adventurer guilds in the universe try to rope you in as a young talent. It's like your whole life changes. And you instantly become famous and rich, which is why I must make it there. Yeah, well, good luck dreaming when you're standing next to walking disasters like Su Yong and Skyshard. How the hell are we supposed to compete? We're not. That's the thing. This year, we're not competing, we're surviving. I've already made peace with it. I'm aiming for the next year's summer camp. They say the top 5 students who don't make it into the circuit team get auto-qualified for it, and honestly, I think I've got a shot. With those 2 on the team, and Mu Shen, Mu Ryan, and Doku basically locked in for 3 of the next year's summer camp slots, there's 2 spots still left up for grabs and I think I can clutch onto one of them. Exactly. It's sensible to start planning for the next year, as realistically your chances of making it to the team this year are slim to none. But if this year, you can't be in the top 5 newbies, then your dreams of ever appearing in the circuits are as good as dead. Because then you're just cannon fodder. You train, you bleed, you get passed over. That's the game. The students discussed while stretching before today's morning training, as everyone seemed super motivated to do their best for the upcoming selections. As even if they could not make it to the team this year, a good performance could confirm their seat for next year, which was crucial if they wanted to keep their dreams of ever appearing in the circuits alive. Leo's paw. As Leo stretched before the start of physical training, his thoughts drifted back to the conversation he had shared with Su Yong the previous day, while the 2 of them were recovering side by side in the medical ward. It had come rather unexpectedly, however, it was a much welcome reality check for Leo. I think I've finally hit the physical and mental thresholds I need to attempt the next tier, Skyshard. This fourth shot has given me that last push I was missing. And with me already having mastered the 5 skills necessary to break through, I feel like I'm close to touching the limit. The only department I'm lacking in now is the mana concentration needed to break through. My body still can't store enough mana to facilitate a breakthrough. But my goal is to hit the required concentration within the next 2 weeks, so I have enough time to train with my new strength before the circuit selections begin. I suffered a lot of humiliation last time, and I need to repay all of it, with interest this time. Because, that's the only way I'll reclaim my confidence in myself and in my bloodline. So try to keep up, Skyshard. You may have the better fighting style right now, but I'm about to leave you in the dust. Su Yang had warned, as Leo did not take those words lightly. Just like him, Su Yang had been grinding obsessively ever since his defeat against Minerva. As a thoroughbred noble, he had hit his life's lowest point when he was humiliated and defeated by Minerva, and ever since then he had been training like a maniac. Unlike his previous self, who was accustomed to riding on talent alone, this changed Su Yang pushed himself relentlessly for every bit of progress he could make. And now, with a breakthrough within his arm's reach, he was about to get the rewards for his hard work, which would increase his battle strength by leaps and bounds, and mount significant pressure on Leo, who would be suddenly left behind. Because unlike Su Yang, who was expected to break through in the next 2 weeks, Leo still needed 5 to 6 more weeks to get there himself. His mana concentration was almost at the necessary level, as the complete Marrow meditation manual showed he had already completed over 90% of the cellular replacement process. With him now needing just 4 more weeks of 6-hour meditation sessions to finally meet the threshold required to advance. But unfortunately that wasn't the only requirement. He was still lacking in the physical, mental, and skill categories, which were all critical pillars of progression that couldn't be overlooked. Celestial Veil and 1000 Phantom Strikes still needed to be pushed from advanced to perfect mastery. And parallel processing, which didn't follow any traditional grading system, also had to be sharpened through constant repetition, until it also hit perfect grade and became instinctive under pressure. I'm not too far behind, but I'm behind, Leo analyzed, as deep down he knew that he wasn't miles away from Su Yang, and was very much on pace to become a Grand Master before the selections. However, there still remained some significant roadblocks that he needed to iron out, before he could catch up to Su Yang once again. Skyshard, Yang, you'll both be wearing the 300 kg vests today, along with an additional 10 kg on each wrist and ankle, Marvin instructed, his tone firm as he gestured toward the weighted gear. Su Yang stepped forward without hesitation, lifting the 300 kg vest with a practiced motion. But to Marvin's surprise, Leo did not follow suit. Instead, Leo reached for the 325 kg vest, his expression unreadable, like a man on a mission. I said 300, Skyshard. Not 325, Marvin repeated, but Leo paid him no heed, slipping the heavier vest over his shoulders without so much as a glance back. Something about Su Yang already brushing up against his physical limits while he hadn't yet even approached his own, didn't sit right with Leo. If I can't out-train him, I'll never catch up to him, Leo thought, as he realized that if he wanted to make up the gap between them, he'd have to push himself harder, starting now. Are you sure about this, Skyshard? You were struggling hard with the 290 yesterday, Su Yang reminded, raising an eyebrow, as Leo answered with a silent, impassive nod. Can't let you leave me in the dust, he said simply, as Su Yang grinned, understanding immediately. This was Leo's way of declaring that the chase was on, and Su Yang welcomed it. Very well then, try not to fall behind my pace today, he replied, as Marvin clapped his hands and ordered the rest of the class to begin the day's drills. From a distance, the second-year seniors stealthily observed the juniors' training session, intent on gathering crucial intel about their future opponents. As with circuit selection day only 7 weeks away, every detail mattered. They tracked every sign of potential, every moment of hesitation, every flash of strength from the juniors who looked like they might threaten their current spots on the team. Unlike the first years, who still believed raw power and flashy technique were enough, the seniors knew better. One-on-one combat wasn't just a contest of strength, it was a chess match, and information in such matches was the king. To know your opponent was to know yourself. And if you knew where they excelled, and more importantly, where they faltered, you could shape a perfect strategy for victory. That very approach had been the key to Kjall and Minerva's wins over Leo and Su Yang. It wasn't brute strength that carried them, it was preparation, as without that groundwork, those matches could have easily tipped the other way. In fact, if they'd fought purely on instinct, Kjall might have lost outright. Wait, he's putting on the 325-kilo vest. One of the seniors muttered, squinting. That's what Kjall wears now. A stunned silence followed, broken only by the thunder of footsteps hitting the track. Look at the way Skyshard and Su Yang are running, another said, narrowing his eyes. That speed, they're practically flying across the field, and they're not even breathing hard. Are they really still first years? They're not supposed to be this physically gifted. Those two, they might be once in a generation, Minerva murmured, her voice low, the words half whispered more to herself than anyone else. A strange sense of relief washed over her. She was glad she had pushed herself into the Grandmaster realm recently. Because if she hadn't, she would be genuinely worried about facing those two again. So, which one of us loses our seat? Caleb asked, his tone dry but edged with tension. Do you think we're still safe against them? Silence answered him. There were 10 spots in every circuit team, but only 5 were selected for each matchup by the captain. Typically, 3 of those 5 were the unshakable core, mainstays who fought nearly every match, while the remaining 2 spots rotated depending on specialties and opponent matchups. It was a system that allowed versatility, but also constant pressure. Every member got to fight at least once during a circuit season, but only the best kept their place in the core. And while Yu Shen and Minerva were secure at the top, undeniably the strongest, the rest of the team. They were vulnerable. Leo and Su Yang were rising fast, and someone was going to be replaced. We'll need to get creative if we want to keep up with those two. But I sure as hell won't give up my spot without a fight, Marcus said, fists clenched. As a chorus of agreement followed. Me too. Same here. Let's take turns watching them. By the time selection day arrives, we'll know everything, from their breathing patterns to their footwork. The group nodded in agreement, already crafting a surveillance schedule amongst each other, as if they couldn't match the monsters rising in the junior ranks with raw power, then they decided to match them with obsession. Meanwhile, Yu Shen, training alone in the second-year physical training grounds, just adjacent to the first years, Yu Shen shook his head in quiet disdain, his muscles straining under the weight of his relentless regimen. Cowards, every last one of them who went to scout the juniors today, are cowards. His jaw clenched as the thought echoed in his mind. Before you can become the circuit champion, you must develop a champion's mindset. And not a single one of them has it. He exhaled sharply, disappointment darkening his gaze. If you can't win your circuit matches without relying on scouting reports and cheap tricks, then you don't belong on the team. Strategy has its place, I agree, but if that's all you've got, then you'll never be a champion. You might pull off the occasional upset, but true champions dominate. They don't scrape by. Fury began to fuel each repetition, his pace intensifying. Instead of training beside me, instead of trying to become the best version of yourself, you waste your mornings spying on rookies, because you're that scared of them. Pathetic. Yu Shen's fists tightened, veins bulging across his forearms. He had pushed his team hard these past months, dragging them to a respectable level through sheer will. But what he couldn't change, no matter how hard he tried, was who they were at their core. You can hand a beggar a fortune, but unless he's got the stomach to digest that wealth, he'll always act like he's poor. And that was the problem with some of his teammates. They wore the Rodova Circuit's uniforms, but carried the mindset of lowlifes, obsessed with tactics and results, with no hunger for real strength or personal growth. Such warriors, in Yu Shen's eyes, were beyond saving. He could motivate them, he could carry them, but he could never change what they believed. Minerva, you ask me why I made Kjall vice captain over you, even though you're a grandmaster and he's not. His gaze turned steely as he recalled the decision. This is why. You may be stronger, but your mindset is shallow. You chase perfection in outcomes, not in effort. You're not the kind of leader others should follow, and that's why you're not the vice captain. As Yu Shen pushed through another brutal set, sweat pouring and muscles burning, he no longer questioned his choice. In Kjall, he saw hunger. In Minerva, he saw calculation. And when the time came to fight the real battles, the kind that couldn't be won with intel and clever timing, he knew who would still be standing beside him. In life, some of the biggest breakthroughs often came not through methodical planning, but through sudden, spur-of-the-moment moments of clarity, and Leo was no exception. Up until now, with no real metrics to track or measure the progress of parallel processing, he often found himself lost, unsure of where exactly he stood with the skill, which bothered him deeply. That was, until one afternoon during training, a flicker of insight hit him suddenly like an unexpected flash of understanding, allowing him to finally grasp the fundamental difference between different mastery levels of skills, that was beyond the textbook definitions he had memorized. He had always known the standard breakdown. Just learning how to perform a move was considered basic mastery. If you could activate it in under 0.75 seconds, it became intermediate mastery. Under 0.3 seconds, and it was advanced mastery. And when you brought that time below 0.1 seconds, the skill was considered to be at perfect mastery. But something about that model never sat quite right with him. Because, in practice, he'd noticed minor inconsistencies, activation times that varied by plus or minus 0.8 seconds across different skills, but still classified under the same tier of mastery. And he had never truly understood why that happened, until now. Because today, as he activated full counter, a skill he had already mastered, and compared it against parallel processing, which he was still struggling to internalize, the realization clicked. The difference wasn't just in timing. It was in instinct. Full counter required no conscious thought. It felt natural, almost primal. Like catching a ball flying toward his face, where his body responded before his brain could even process the action. But activating parallel processing, it was like trying to throw a ball into a moving basket. There was thought involved, intention, a split second of calculation and adjustment, a mental delay that made all the difference. In the first case, the body moved before the mind could interfere. In the second, the mind had to issue the command first, then the body followed. And that subtle hesitation, that was the difference between instinct and intention. Between mastery and understanding. Between knowing a skill, and it being a part of who you are. And with that realization, Leo finally began to understand what mastery truly felt like, not as a measure of speed, but as a measure of instinct. And it was then that Leo finally understood the difference between skills as instinct. As he realized that basic mastery felt like holding a ball for the first time and awkwardly trying to toss it into a basket, as at that stage, every movement needed conscious correction, as your body was unsure of the angle, the strength, the follow-through of how to make the shot. And in contrast, intermediate mastery was like getting better at it after a few hundred throws, where you now had a general rhythm, your muscle memory had begun to form, but you still needed to aim carefully, adjust for distance, and make minor corrections with every attempt. Which further improved at advanced mastery, when you no longer needed to aim anymore, because you could sink the shot without thinking too hard about the angle or trajectory. But perfect mastery. That was different entirely. It was when the basket no longer even mattered, because the act of throwing and scoring had merged into a single motion. You did not need to calculate it. You did not even need to try. You just did it, the same way you walked, or blinked, or breathed, as the skill simply became reflex. And in that moment of clarity, Leo finally realized what level of mastery he was at with parallel processing. As while activating it had been feeling like throwing a ball with a lot of hesitation a few weeks ago. It had started to feel more natural now, with him barely having to think about it anymore, as the activation time for the skill dropped to just about 3.5 seconds. However, although the activation time was still on the higher end, Leo was sure that he had hit advanced mastery for the skill, as the whole feel had shifted. And that gave him a lot of confidence to advance it to perfect mastery in the coming weeks, as just knowing what grade it was it brought him a lot of mental peace. Rodova Military Academy, Leo's dorm room. Once the cellular replacement rate in his body surpassed the 95% threshold, after several grueling months of practicing the complete marrow meditation manual, Leo finally began to witness the full effects of the technique unfold before his eyes. His bone marrow, once the standard dull yellow that marked an ordinary constitution, now shimmered with a distinct golden hue, as it underwent a profound and irreversible transformation. At this stage, the very DNA embedded within his marrow production cells was being rewritten, reprogrammed to permanently alter the way his body functioned at its core. No longer would he need to spend hours in meditation to stimulate new blood cell production. As from this point forward, his body would maintain that process autonomously, efficiently, naturally, and without conscious effort. Crossing the 95% threshold meant Leo had entered the final phase of the complete marrow meditation manual. With the meditation manual now directing him to focus on altering the marrow production sites permanently instead of producing new cells, in a process that lasted about 3 to 4 weeks. Once completed, the transformation would be final. The new blood cell production system would become a permanent part of his physiology, requiring no additional effort to maintain. As Leo would find himself completely free from the burden of meditating every day. What had once been a daily routine, which required him to spend 6 relentless hours of stillness, strain, and inner turmoil, would finally become obsolete. And with that time freed, Leo could focus entirely on the things that truly mattered: combat, skills, and breaking through. Because from this moment on, his foundation in physiology and mana circulation wouldn't just be solid. It would be unshakable. Rodova Military Academy, Practical Combat Grounds. Over the next 2 weeks, Leo trained like an absolute maniac, pushing himself a step beyond what even he believed he was capable of, as he drove himself to failure every single day. It got to a point where even the instructors started to fear for his sanity and health, as they very verbally voiced their concerns, warning Leo about the pitfalls of burning out and overtraining, but Leo only dug in deeper. Because the moment Su Yang officially broke through to the Grandmaster tier, everything changed. The first thing Su Yang did after his breakthrough was challenge Leo to a spar. Not out of arrogance, but because he genuinely wanted to test his new strength against the one person he measured himself against in this academy, which was Leo. Their rivalry had been brewing since day one. In their first week, Su Yang had absolutely wiped the floor with him. And for the better part of the first 3 months of their academy life, he maintained that lead, his raw talent and excellent upbringing making up the difference every time they clashed. But then Leo started to find his rhythm. His new fighting style took shape, and it made him fluid, precise and unpredictable. As slowly, the tides started to turn. Spars that once ended in decisive losses for Leo began to lean his way. Until recently, when Su Yang could barely touch him anymore, because Leo had become just that fast and unpredictable for him to take on. But now the dynamic had changed again. As with Su Yang becoming a Grandmaster first, the power difference once again started to lean his way. The moment their first spar after Su Yang's breakthrough to Grandmaster began, Leo immediately sensed that something was wrong. He couldn't put his finger on it at first, because it wasn't Su Yang's presence, his footwork, or even the way he gripped his blade that unsettled him, but rather, it was his eyes. Those golden, eerily calm eyes threw Leo off balance, as just meeting his gaze sent a subtle shiver crawling down his spine, one he hadn't felt since that day in the Rodova mess hall, when he had first locked eyes with Yushen. And today, Su Yang's eyes carried that same pressure. That same unspoken warning. And that was what alarmed Leo first. Su Yang's bloodline skill, domination had never once worked on Leo before, not even slightly. But now, as those golden eyes stared straight through him, Leo felt the unmistakable pull of Su Yang's will pressing against his own. Not overwhelming, but sharp enough to make his body tense and his thoughts sharpen with unease. And in that moment, Leo's jaw clenched as realization struck. Domination became more potent the wider the strength gap was between the user and their opponent, and while it had failed to affect Leo in the past, back when their powers were evenly matched, that balance had now shifted. As with Leo falling behind, domination had finally taken hold. And as the first clash of blades erupted between them, Leo discovered it wasn't just the passive pressure that had changed. Everything about Su Yang felt different. His footwork was crisper, his speed faster, and the sheer weight behind every movement was simply overwhelming. Within seconds, Leo found himself on the back foot, forced into a reactive stance, as if he were a cornered mouse facing down a hungry tiger. Whoosh! Su Yang's sword came crashing down in a familiar arc, activating the basic move, vertical slash, a technique Leo had blocked dozens of times before. But this time, when Leo raised both daggers to intercept the blow, the sheer force of the strike sent a jarring vibration through his bones, numbing his arms even as he managed to block it. Clang! He staggered back, blinking in disbelief. The skill, it's the same move, the same execution, but the power output. It was completely different. Shockingly different. Because while the move and the man delivering it hadn't changed, the realm he now stood in had. Su Yang, now a grandmaster, was playing by a different set of rules. Everything about him had leveled up, not just his strength, but his perception, his movement, his capacity to read and control the tempo of battle, and it showed with every passing second. There was an old saying in the combat world: even the weakest grandmaster is stronger than the strongest master. Leo had always dismissed that line as a dramatic exaggeration. But he couldn't do so anymore. Not after this. Not after watching the same Su Yang who had been struggling to land hits on him, suddenly dominate their match so thoroughly that Leo couldn't even mount a decent defense. Clang! Block! Clang! Every exchange ended with Leo being driven back. Every attempt at a counter was anticipated and intercepted. It felt like he was back in week 1 of the academy, helpless, scrambling, trying to survive, while Su Yang stood towering above him, untouchable. He's like Major Hen now, Leo thought, panting heavily as he slid across the arena floor, ribs throbbing from a brutal kick. Su Yang hadn't become invincible, but the gap between them had widened more than Leo ever expected. And the worst part, he wasn't even using new techniques. Just the same old ones, reused, recycled, but now amplified by the sheer force and finesse of a grandmaster. And that was the true horror of it. Because the same techniques Leo once dismissed as predictable were now being delivered with such precision and overwhelming pressure, that they felt brand new again. As apparently, that's what becoming a grandmaster truly meant. As one not only improved in every measurable physical, mental and magical metrics when they tiered up, but they also improved everything associated with those metrics, such as skills and their outputs. For if both a Grandmaster Mage and a Master Mage who had mastered Fireball to the same perfect grade, unleashed it at once. If the Master Mage could burn down one tree using it, then the Grandmaster would burn down 10. As such was the sheer power output difference between tiers. Sheesh. I had completely forgotten about the sensation of beating your ass so thoroughly. I had forgotten how enjoyable it was, Su Yang said, after their spar was over, as he seemed to be in visibly high spirits. Nice one, Yang, Leo replied back, as he lay sprawled on the floor, covering his eyes with his arm, as he recalled the mistakes he made in this fight with an impassive face. You've got to catch up to me, Skyshard. Don't let me get too far ahead, or people will forget you're my rival. Su Yang said in a joking tone, as Leo only hummed in reply. MMHMM. In the first place, he never cared about their friendship or rivalry as deeply as Su Yang did, however, he did not dislike it either. For him Su Yang was a measuring stick who motivated him to be his best, which was why he kept him around, but there were no deeper feelings involved. However, that was not the case for Su-yong, who saw a genuine friend and a lifelong brother in Leo. As taking a seat beside him, Yang finally spoke what was weighing heavily on his mind for the past few months. I know the class doesn't laugh at us anymore, not like they did after we lost to the seniors during the early days, Su-yong muttered, his voice low but sharp. But that's not enough for me. Not even close. I won't be satisfied until I smash Minerva and Yu Shen's smug faces into the dirt in front of everyone, and laugh while doing it. That's the only kind of revenge that matters. He turned to Leo then, his gaze fierce. You and me, Skyshard, were nobles. We carry the blood of gods in our veins. And these filthy commoners, they're nothing. They were born from dirt and will return to it. I don't care how much Rodova preaches equality or how proud they are of building this academy on merit, because I know exactly what happens if we let commoners think they're equal to us. His voice dropped a notch, laced with venom. They'll become the next oppressors of this universe. Just like David. That man hates us, not because we're bad people, but because we remind him of what he'll never be. Su-yong paused, his hands clenched so tightly his knuckles went white. Can you imagine if David were the principal of Rodova? He said, voice rising with disbelief. Do you honestly think he'd let us train like this? That he'd ever give us a fair shot at graduating? No. He'd sabotage us at every turn, because he's blinded by his obsession with lifting up the commoners. He'd never care about our struggles, no matter how hard we try. And that's exactly why we can't ever let them look down on us. He exhaled hard, his eyes burning with conviction. We have to keep reminding them who truly rules this universe. Because the second they start believing we're equals, that's when the chaos begins. That's when everything falls apart. To me, the commoners are a bigger threat to this universe than the evil cult ever was, Su-yong declared, the hatred in his voice thick and unfiltered. Then, after a long breath, he turned to Leo again. In the end, it's us against the universe, brother. His lips curled into a cold, determined smile. So you'd better keep up, because I won't be waiting for you for too long, and also because we have to remind this academy of who its real owners are. After getting his ass handed to him by Su-yong, Leo spent the next 2 weeks of academy life in a state of singular obsession, driven entirely by the need to push himself beyond his current limits. And eventually, he found them. His physical progress came to a screeching halt when, despite his maximum effort, he could no longer complete Professor Marvin's daily drills beyond the 350 kilograms vest. No matter how much he strained, gritted his teeth, or punished his body, he simply couldn't break past that ceiling, as it seemed like the enhancements granted by the complete Marrow Meditation Manual, along with the cumulative effects of the genetic awakening shots, had already been fully absorbed into his system. Every drop of physical potential had been extracted, leaving nothing more to unlock at the master tier. As for his mental state, 5 relentless months of training to failure had forged his willpower into steel. His pain tolerance, focus, and discipline had been stretched to the brink and hardened beyond recognition. And with that, Leo had finally completed 2 of the 5 major requirements for tier advancement, achieving a major milestone. Rodova Military Academy, Leo's dorm room. On the meditation front, exactly 2 weeks before the circuit selection day rolled around, Leo managed to complete the Complete Marrow Meditation Manual in full, as he successfully transformed his body's natural marrow production sites to independently produce the enhanced blood cells from now on. Congratulations! You have completely replaced all the blood cells in your body with the enhanced blood cells. Meditation progress 100%. The meditation manual flipped to its last page, congratulating Leo on reaching completion. And although Leo expected the book to just end there, it unexpectedly flipped to one more page, where it gave Leo recommendations on what books to follow from now onwards. Enjoyed the Marrow Meditation Manual? Here are some more books from the author that may help you reach the transcendent stage. 1. Deep Vein Refinement, a deep tissue meditation method. This technique focuses on refining the body's inner vascular and mana channels, strengthening the walls of veins, arteries, and mana conduits to handle greater pressure and flow. Practitioners often describe a sensation of their blood boiling as their body adapts to circulating high-density mana without rupturing. 2. Cranial Reinforcement Protocol, enhancing neural stability. A cerebral-focused meditation technique that works on increasing neural conductivity and improving resistance to mental strain. This method is especially useful for those who frequently use high-speed cognitive skills, as it allows for better control, longer usage times, and reduced mental fatigue. 3. Lung Blooming Cycle, the foundation of breath-controlled mana circulation. An advanced breathing-centric manual that trains the lungs and diaphragm to better regulate internal mana flow. It allows users to store and release mana in sync with their breathing patterns, improving battle endurance, burst capability, and resistance to internal mana turbulence. Leo stared blankly at the final page. His eyes scanned the headers, then moved down to the brief descriptions, only for a mirthless sigh to escape his lips. Shameless self-promotion at the end, of course, he muttered, dragging a hand down his face. He'd just finished months of agonizing marrow-level reconstruction, and now the book was casually recommending neural rewiring and boiling his blood vessels like it was a fun after-school activity. Thankfully, I still have time before I need to choose my next manual, so thanks for the recommendations, but I won't be needing them for now, Leo muttered to himself, closing the holographic book for the final time. With that, he had officially completed the third and fourth requirements on his path to becoming a Grandmaster. The complete Marrow Meditation Manual was done and his mana concentration had finally reached the breakthrough threshold. 4 out of 5 requirements completed. Just need to focus on my skills now, Leo murmured, exhaling slowly as the weight of his progress settled in. And with meditation no longer consuming 6 hours of his day, starting tomorrow, he could dedicate every waking moment to pure combat training, pushing his body until it gave out. Because now, there was nothing left to hold him back. 2 weeks until the selections. I hope it's enough. Rodova Military Academy, Ni and Fei's room. Ni and Fei double-checked the lock on her door for the third time before drawing the thick blackout curtains shut. Her breathing slowed as she activated the noise suppression formation etched beneath her desk, one of the few luxuries she'd managed to smuggle into the academy quarters under the guise of meditation enhancements. Once the room was secure, she retrieved the communication crystal from the room's hidden compartment, as a chill ran down her spine the moment she touched it. Why did the Elder request an emergency mission from me? She wondered, as channeling her mana into the crystal, she felt its dormant energy awaken, glowing faintly with a cold, bluish hue. Within seconds, the connection was established and a deep voice cut through the silence, crackling with static-laced authority. How is Skyshard progressing? The voice asked, low and commanding, unmistakably that of the evil cult elder who served as her direct handler. Ni and Fei's eyes lit up as she straightened her posture, suppressing the excitement in her voice, though a slight yelp of enthusiasm still slipped out. He's advancing rapidly. He's already hit the physical and mental thresholds required for a Grandmaster breakthrough, and from what I've seen, he'll cross the meditation and mana thresholds very soon. At this rate, he's on track to become a Grandmaster in less than 6 months since joining the Academy, she added with pride, her voice tinged with awe at Leo's unprecedented growth. But the response from the crystal was not what she expected. A cold scoff echoed back. Not enough, the Elder said flatly. This level of speed is the bare minimum. If he truly wishes to survive as a dragon, he must move even faster. His tone was devoid of praise, only expectation. Ni and Fei opened her mouth to respond but held back, swallowing her irritation. She knew better than to question the Elder's standards when it came to Leo. As after a tense pause, the Elder's voice returned, cutting through the silence like a knife. Did you secure the caretaker position for the circuits team as instructed? He asked, as Fei nodded instinctively, before remembering that he couldn't see her. Yes, I did. I've been officially assigned as one of the team's support personnel during the selection and tournament period. She replied before going silent. However, after a couple of seconds, she found herself incapable of suppressing her curiosity, which was why she asked, but, why was this so important? Why go to such lengths just to have me stationed there? The elder was quiet for a moment, as though deciding how much he was allowed to say. Then came his reply, slow, ominous, and dripping with implication. Something is going to happen at the circuits this year. Something big. I can't share the details yet, but when the time comes, you must be ready to act, and most importantly, if things go wrong, you are to protect Skyshard at all costs. Nian's breath caught in her throat. Her fingers tightened around the crystal as unease twisted in her gut. The elder's tone left no room for interpretation. This wasn't speculation. This was certainty. The evil cult was planning something major for this year's circuits, and there was a chance that Leo may be caught in the crossfire, as an unsuspecting bystander. Understood, she whispered, her voice barely audible, as a silence stretched between them once more. Finally, after a few seconds, the elder spoke again, his tone as impassive as ever. Report again once he breaks through. Until then, you have no further orders. The connection severed immediately, the crystal's glow vanishing like a snuffed flame. Nian Fei sat frozen in place, her thoughts racing. She didn't know what was coming. She didn't know when. But one thing was clear. The circuits this year would be far more than a tournament if the evil cult was planning an operation. Rodova Military Academy, Practical Combat Grounds. Leo, like many other students vying for a spot on the circuits team, often trained well past midnight at the Practical Combat Grounds, relentlessly sharpening his techniques and pushing each skill toward perfection. With only 10 days remaining until selection day, he stood on the cusp of a breakthrough. Every one of his unperfected skills hovered just above the 0.1 second activation mark, agonizingly close to perfection, yet still out of reach. But now, for the first time, Leo felt a surge of confidence. He was certain he could push through to the next tier within the coming week. Yet, standing at the threshold of advancement, he came to a frustrating realization: he had no idea how one actually broke through from the Master Realm to the Grandmaster Realm. He understood the requirements, sure. But the process itself, the exact mechanics of the transformation, that remained a mystery. Which is why, after wrapping up tonight's training, Leo went to find Major Hen, to ask him about the same. What do you mean you don't know how to break through? That's the most basic knowledge even 7-year-old kids learn in school, Major Hen said, staring at Leo like he'd grown a second head. How did you even become a master-level warrior if you don't know how to break through? He asked again, this time with visible irritation, as for a moment, he thought Leo was purposely messing with him, but Leo remained quiet. If you're trying to piss me off, boy, Hen began, but then paused as his eyes widened slightly in realization. Your memory loss, he muttered, rubbing his temples as he let out a long sigh. Right, forgot about that. He seemed to suddenly remember that Leo had suffered memory loss before being admitted to the academy, a detail Leo had revealed during his first bout against Su Yong at the start of the semester. Hen had pushed that fact out of his mind, mostly because over the past 5 months, Leo had never once behaved like someone who lacked fundamental knowledge. He carried himself with confidence, strategy, and instinct, never once seeming lost. That's why it took Hen a moment to remember that Leo genuinely lacked some of the basic knowledge needed to survive in this world. All right, he said, folding his arms as he looked at Leo with a mix of pity and mild frustration. I'm assuming you don't even know the difference between a master and a grandmaster warrior beyond the name. Leo gave a small nod. All right then. Let me start from there. Then I'll walk you through the process. A master-level warrior, Hen began, is the peak of what your species can naturally become. That's it. There's no universal standard for being a master. It's based entirely on the limits of your race. Technically, you should be called a master human warrior, not just master warrior, but since Rodova is an all-human academy, we don't bother using the full title. A master human warrior, a master orc warrior, a master elf warrior, they're all different. Their power is capped by what their species can physically and mentally handle. An orc master is naturally going to be stronger than a human master, just like a dragonkin master might have far more mana than either. That's why there's no single standard across races. Leo nodded in understanding. If an average human master can carry a 200 kilograms load across 1 kilometer without slowing down, a master orc might be able to carry 700. But they might lack the same agility or reflexes in a flat-out dash, and between all the myriad species, discrepancies of the like are many. However, that's not the case with Grandmasters, Hen added, as Leo replied with a quiet, I see. A Grandmaster breaks that ceiling. Species doesn't matter anymore at that point. The title becomes universal. A Grandmaster human can go toe-to-toe with a Grandmaster orc, or even win on any metric, because the body isn't just running on biology anymore. He let the words hang for a moment before continuing. When someone becomes a Grandmaster, their body starts operating on mana as its main power source. Muscles, nerves, organs, everything gets rewired. They're no longer bound by the meat and bone they were born with. Mana powers their strength, endurance, and speed. The reason people respect Grandmasters so much is because they've undergone a transformation. They aren't just stronger, they've evolved. Leo stayed silent, but the look in his eyes showed he understood. A Grandmaster is still mortal, of course, they can't go on forever without food or sleep, Hen clarified. But they can maintain peak function for an entire week without eating, and stay awake for 3 days straight without breaking down, while a Master Warrior can never do that. As unlike Masters who rely on physiology for survival, Grandmasters rely on mana. With the foundation laid, Hen moved on. Now, he said, stepping closer. Let me tell you how that transformation actually happens. As you already know, there are 5 requirements you must fulfill before you can even attempt to break through. Without all 5, you don't even get to touch the threshold. Leo gave a small nod, confirming that he knew that much at least. Which made Hen feel slightly relieved. All right, since you know that, let me explain why each of those thresholds is necessary. He held up one finger. First is physical limit. Your body needs to be trained to its absolute peak. Muscles, bones, tendons, everything, because if your body can't handle what's coming, it'll get torn apart mid-process. Leo's eyes widened slightly. There's no guarantee of success, Leo, Hen said firmly. Reaching the threshold doesn't mean you're safe. It just means you're ready to risk your life. The breakthrough process is lethal if you're not fully prepared. Up until now, Leo had thought that reaching the threshold was the hard part. He had no idea the actual breakthrough itself was where the real danger began. Second is the mental limit. You need unwavering focus and iron willpower. The process is agony, pure and simple. If your mind isn't strong enough, you'll pass out, or lose your mind, before you're even halfway through. Hen raised a second finger as Leo nodded. Third is meditation manual perfection. All manuals that guide a user to the Grandmaster stage are different, but they all serve one purpose, to refine your mana circulation. Through constant repetition, your circuits become smoother, more stable and your control over mana becomes sharper. That's crucial for surviving what comes next, he said, raising a third finger. Fourth is mana saturation. Your body must store as much mana as it physically can, because without that internal reserve, you won't survive the moment your system gets drained. You'll need it to come back from the brink of death. He raised a fourth finger with a grim expression. And finally, Hen said, his voice quieter now, is skill perfection. As you probably already know, once the breakthrough starts, your body will be flooded with dangerous levels of unstable mana. Your only way to get rid of it is to unleash every skill you've mastered, one after another, to burn through the poison before it kills you. He raised the fifth and final finger, a smug smile crossing his face. Every phase of the breakthrough carried a lethal risk. And Hen knew Leo was finally beginning to realize just how serious it all was. Only when you've hit all 5 thresholds should you even consider starting the process. And once I explain how that breakthrough process actually works, you'll understand why I've been warning you so much. Hen's expression hardened as he looked Leo dead in the eye. Believe me, I'm not exaggerating the risks at all. After warning Leo about all the risks associated with the breakthrough, Hen began explaining the process itself. It starts with a breakthrough potion. A volatile compound that supercharges your mana core and floods your system with raw energy. The second it hits, your mana circuits are forced to widen. And I don't mean gently, Hen said, mimicking the motion of drinking from a bottle. His face twitched in discomfort, as if haunted by memories better left buried. It's like shoving a hurricane through a straw, he muttered with a grim expression. Most people scream. Some go catatonic. And those who haven't trained their mental limit, they die on the spot. Leo nodded, slow and expressionless. I see. Internally, he was already imagining how he'd direct the flow, mapping out his current circuit pathways, noting the weaknesses he'd need to reinforce before attempting such a surge. The danger didn't intimidate him, it simply presented a formula with very real consequences. If you survive that, Hen continued, the mana doesn't just move through your circuits anymore. It starts infiltrating your nervous system and bloodstream. That's when your body begins to change on a physiological level. At key overlap points, your spine, your heart, your major arteries, your mana circuits start merging with your biology. These merge zones are called chakra nodes. Each one becomes a fusion point between your nervous system, bloodstream, and mana circuits. This stage is excruciating, but once it's complete, your muscles begin receiving mana directly. Think of it like switching from combustion fuel to clean energy. But this comes with a risk. Because if your body's not strong enough and your muscles can't take it, they melt, which will leave you crippled in seconds. Hen said, giving Leo a meaningful look. But if you're ready, your body adapts. It upgrades. High-performance engine, high-grade fuel. Everything becomes smoother, faster, stronger. Hen paused, letting the silence carry the weight of that sentence. But it's not over yet. Leo didn't move, but his mind was already ticking. He absorbed everything Hen said and started to envision it in a chronological order, listing out the risks associated with each stage. After that stage, once you're overloaded, that same energy that helped you break through becomes toxic if left unused. So you have to burn it, fast. You activate every technique you've got. Back to back. Rapid fire. Anything to drain yourself dry, because if you hesitate, even for a second, that mana starts corroding you from the inside. Hen's tone darkened. At this point, you'll be in so much pain, mentally and physically, you won't be able to perform anything that isn't pure instinct. Your body won't be stable enough to execute skills you haven't perfected. That's why skill perfection before breaking through is mandatory, Hen added. Because only when a move becomes second nature can you rely on it during the breakthrough. Leo nodded again. No emotion. But internally, he felt enlightened to know the actual reason behind needing skill perfection. It was actually because he needed those skills to quickly burn off excess mana, because if he did not, he could die. And once you're empty, completely hollowed out, after all the excess energy is gone, Hen said quietly, that's when you move to the final step. You release your own natural mana into your new body. You flood the system, every inch of it. Because if you don't fill it in time, your body, now redesigned to live off mana, starts shutting down. You'll feel like you're holding your breath in a vacuum, like suffocating from the inside out. Hen's voice flattened. And if you don't have enough mana to fully saturate your new body, then the transformation halts. You end up in a broken state, alive, but ruined. Your circuits won't work right. You'll never reach Grandmaster. Leo stood still, processing the sequence like a tactical report. Step by step, each phase was brutal, but precise. There were no random factors here. Just thresholds. Control. Preparation. Hen let out a breath, breaking the silence. That's the path, kid. Becoming a Grandmaster isn't leveling up. It's being torn apart and rebuilt. And only if you survive it all do you get to ascend. He exhaled again, softer this time. You're lucky you're doing this at the Rodova Military Academy. The institution provides you with one of the highest grade breakthrough potions in the system, for free. Hen's voice turned slightly nostalgic. When I was a master, I had to gather the ingredients myself. I scoured wild zones for some herbs, bought some on the black market, begged others for some in exchange for favors I'd rather forget. He shook his head. And even after all that, I still had to pay an alchemist to brew it. And trust me, he wasn't top tier. My potion had minor impurities, burned like hell going down. I was lucky to survive. Leo didn't respond, but he finally understood his privilege for being a Rodova Military Academy student. Because, if he wasn't here, he would have to struggle a lot more to get the same results. Just because his environment would demand it from him. Outside this academy, nothing comes easy, Hen said, as he offered Leo some genuine life advice. When you're inevitably someday ready to break through to the transcendent stage, don't expect anyone to hand you a potion. Start planning for it years in advance. He leaned in slightly, voice quiet. Because if you don't, it'll take years just to gather the materials and find an alchemist talented enough to brew it for you. Leo gave one final nod, slow and deliberate. He understood now. Standing here, in the heart of Rodova, surrounded by systems built to support him, he was living in a controlled environment. A privilege most warriors in the real world would kill for. Universal government soldiers spent decades in service to earn the right to a breakthrough potion. Independent warriors risked their lives hunting down each ingredient on their own, hoping they wouldn't die before the last one was found. Compared to them, Leo's path had been easy. And Hen had made it very clear. It wouldn't stay that way forever, which was why he needed to be grateful for what he had today and prepare thoroughly for what he might not have tomorrow. Thank you for the explanation, Major Hen. I think I understand the entire breakthrough process clearly now. I feel like I'll be ready to break through in about a week's time from now, but I'll let you know when I'm ready, Leo said, as Hen nodded with pride towards him. That's right, kid. It's about time you break through. I've been sparring against you for months now. If you don't break through even after all that help, it will reflect badly on me as an instructor. Ha ha ha. Hen chuckled, as he slapped Leo on the shoulders. Just remember, take proper rest before you attempt a breakthrough. With the way you're training these days, I worry for your sanity. So when you're at the threshold, just take a day to relax and get to your peak, and only then attempt it. Maybe sleep for 9 to 12 hours the previous day. But burn off every inch of fatigue you have in you before you do it. The process is dangerous, and many have lost their lives trying to attempt it when they were not ready, Hen warned, as Leo gave him a final nod of understanding. Don't worry, Major, I'll keep your advice in mind, Leo said before turning to leave. Days later, Rodova Military Academy. Drip, drip. Sweat trickled down Leo's forehead as his body trembled under the relentless weight of accumulated exertion, every muscle fiber twitching from constant tension as the heat surged through him like a furnace nearing combustion. Just a little more, he told himself, activating parallel processing as his mind fragmented across multiple layers, calculating his opponent's movement patterns, regulating his own breathing, analyzing air currents, and maintaining his stance with machine-like precision. Twop! He felt a droplet sliding down his brow, tracking every millimeter of its descent in real time, sensing the exact moment it detached from his chin and began falling. Absolute vision locked onto it mid-air, tracing its arc all the way to the floor as if even gravity itself had slowed to accommodate his perception. But Leo's focus wasn't on the sweat, it was on the man across from him. Major Doss, the Academy's archery instructor, moved like a seasoned predator, releasing another arrow with a fluid snap of his bowstring as the projectile whistled past Leo's cheek, cutting through the air just inches from his skin. Leo's gaze didn't waver, as he had already anticipated the shot. His eyes were locked onto the subtle tightening of the Major's ankles and the controlled coiling of his thigh muscles, clear signs he was about to leap backward to regain distance. No, you're not getting away. As his thoughts aligned with his instincts, Leo activated Mirror World, conjuring two identical clones behind the Major with a flicker of light and distortion. The clones surged forward immediately, forming a physical wall at the precise point where Doss would have landed, as Leo denied him the space he sought. Caught mid-motion, the Major was forced to pivot on instinct, dispatching the clones in twin slashes as sparks flew from the contact, precious seconds lost in the maneuver. That's it, there's my opening. Without a moment's hesitation, Leo activated 1,000 phantom slashes as mana flooded through his limbs and blurred his form into motion, his speed transcending normal perception as his body became a ripple of shifting afterimages. He lunged in with surgical precision, his blade dancing through the air with deceptive rhythm. Every strike was masked behind layered illusions, each step feeding into the next as his slashes overlapped and folded over one another like a spiraling storm of steel and shadows, designed not just to strike, but to overwhelm. Shing. The courtyard rang with the sound of clashing steel and tearing wind as Leo advanced like a machine, precise, relentless, and cold. His movements followed a perfect algorithm, calculated and honed over countless repetitions. Major Doss narrowed his eyes as he shifted into a tighter stance, his breathing slowing even under pressure. With a quick motion, his bow snapped into its compact blade form as he parried one afterimage, then another, each strike blocked with just enough force to maintain balance. Despite the assault, Doss stayed composed, his eyes cutting through the swarm of illusions as he waited, not for an opening, but for the real Leo to reveal himself. He baited a strike to the left and caught a glimpse of flickering movement to his right, spinning just in time to meet the real blade aimed at his ribs. "You're fast, Skyshard, but not fast enough," Doss muttered, as he stomped his heel into the ground. Bam! A controlled shockwave rippled through the platform, distorting the air and scattering the illusion field for a single instant, just long enough for Doss to fully lock onto Leo's position. Twisting on his heel, the Major drove the flat of his blade into Leo's side, following through with a sweeping kick enhanced by condensed mana. The impact struck like a hammer, the air around them pulsing outward as Leo was launched off his feet. He flew backward, boots scraping against the stone as sparks flared beneath him. The momentum carried him across the arena floor, his body skidding several meters before finally halting near the platform's edge, where he dropped to one knee. He had lost this exchange. But instead of frustration, Leo began to chuckle. It started low, hoarse and dry from exertion, but quickly built into something deeper, something unhinged. His shoulders trembled as laughter spilled from him, echoing through the otherwise silent courtyard, raw and feral in tone. Major Doss furrowed his brow as he watched. However, just as suddenly as it began, the laughter stopped. Leo's head lifted, his face wiped clean of emotion as if nothing had happened. The grin that had twisted across his lips vanished in an instant as he rose to his feet with eerie composure, brushing dust from his uniform with slow, methodical movements. Doss eyed him warily, the previous moment still lingering in his mind. "What happened, cadet?" he asked, his voice calm but cautious. Leo adjusted his stance, tapped the hilt of his blade once, and glanced up with clinical focus. "Now I understand, this is what it feels like. My last skill broke through to perfect mastery during this fight," Leo said, his voice smooth but charged with quiet certainty. "I can feel it now, I'm ready to attempt a breakthrough." A faint grin played at the corners of his mouth, subtle but undeniably real, while his eyes remained sharp and unblinking. Major Doss studied him for a second longer before nodding once. "Very well, congratulations." Leo straightened, raised a closed fist to his chest, and gave a crisp, precise salute. "Thank you, sir. Rodova Military Academy, Principal Ulrich's office. If there was one man more eager for Leo Skyshard to reach the threshold of a breakthrough than Leo himself, it was Principal Ulrich Dainhardt. For weeks, the man had been living on edge, checking reports daily, reviewing combat footage, obsessing over training logs, his patience stretched thin, his nerves tighter than the Academy's security seal during an universal government inspection. And now, finally, the news he had been praying for had arrived. "So, just 2 days before the selections begin, Skyshard is ready to break through." Ulrich's voice cracked through the silence of his grand office as he leapt to his feet, his usual composed demeanor crumbling beneath sheer relief. "Ha ha." The laughter that followed wasn't just joy, it was release. He strode over to a tall cabinet lined with aged bottles and pulled open the glass doors, revealing a dark bottle of whiskey sealed in wax, labeled with a handwritten tag, "For Victory." He popped it open with ceremonial reverence, the click of the cork echoing in the room like the tolling of a bell, as reaching for a crystal glass, he dropped in 2 perfectly cut ice cubes before pouring himself a generous measure. This is wonderful news, he muttered, almost in disbelief. If he breaks through successfully, then including him and Su Yang, we'll have 4 Grandmasters in this year's lineup. He raised the glass slightly in the air, half in toast, half in prayer, as he stared out the window overlooking the distant training grounds, the horizon painted in shades of gold and violet. The tides are turning. Ulrich took a slow sip, savoring the warmth that spread through his chest as the whiskey slid down with silky precision. It tasted like vindication. He leaned back in his chair, propping his boots up on the corner of his oakwood desk as he exhaled deeply, the weight of uncertainty finally lifting off his shoulders. "Easy there, Ulrich," he said aloud, speaking to himself with a grin. "You're the man. You're going to bring glory back to this institution. No more second place. No more being overshadowed by those smug bastards from Geneva. The talents you invested in, they're going to save your neck." He took another sip, eyes momentarily closing as he let the warmth anchor him to this rare, quiet moment. Ag. A sigh of deep satisfaction escaped him, carried by the rich scent of oaken-aged spirit as he finally felt the tension begin to dissolve. For the first time in weeks, Principal Ulrich Dainhardt believed he might actually get a full night's sleep. Rodova Military Academy, the day before the breakthrough. After reaching the threshold for his breakthrough, Leo finally took a full day off, just as Major Hen had advised. It was the first time in months that he allowed himself to stop, and only in the stillness of rest did he realize how much his body had been screaming beneath the surface. The aches weren't sharp, but deep and systemic, settled into his bones like a second skin. Every joint throbbed dully, his muscles felt like tightly wound cables fraying at the edges, and even his breath carried a lingering heaviness that he had grown too used to ignoring. That day, Leo slept. Not the shallow naps he'd been surviving on between training sessions, but true, uninterrupted rest. For 17 hours, his body remained still, his mind silent, as the accumulated strain of relentless grinding bled away. When he finally opened his eyes the next morning, his body felt light. Focused. Alive. He stood, dressed, and walked to the promotion wing of the Rodova Military Academy, his mind razor sharp and his aura quiet, like the stillness before a storm. Rodova Military Academy, Promotion Room. The promotion room was massive, its structure composed entirely of reinforced obsidian-tinted steel designed to withstand magical explosions and high-pressure mana bursts. The chamber was bare, no runes, no markings, no equipment, just emptiness, as if inviting chaos to fill it. It was built for one purpose only, to allow a warrior to transcend safely. Major Hen stood waiting just inside the entrance, holding a sleek vial of violet-blue liquid, the Grandmaster Breakthrough Potion. The mana swirling inside glowed faintly, as though photosensitive and mystical. He handed the vial to Leo without ceremony, his gaze firm. Once the chakra node formation stops. Once the mana stops building your body and starts boiling it, that's your sign. You burn it all immediately. No hesitation. You will have a window of about 1.5-2 seconds to burn it all before it starts to damage your body, and if you take anything more than 5 seconds, then you will be a lost cause. So remember to act rapidly at that point, Hen warned, as Leo nodded without a word, gripping the vial tightly as Hen gave him one final look before stepping outside and sealing the heavy steel door behind him with a dull clang. Once Hen left, Leo stepped into the center of the room, his breathing slow and even as he knelt down, placing the vial before him. He took one last moment of stillness. One last breath as a master. Then he uncorked the vial and downed its contents. The potion was warm, strangely smooth at first, but within seconds, that warmth turned molten. A surge of energy exploded through his chest, flooding his mana core with violent force as it rushed into every corner of his body. The pain hit almost instantly. It wasn't sharp, but vast, a wave of pressure that bloomed from his core outward, like he was being inflated from the inside. His circuits lit up as the mana burst into them like a flood through a narrow canal, forcefully widening them with each second that passed. Leo clenched his jaw, body shaking as he dropped to one knee, mana sparking wildly around him. His vision blurred, his muscles tensed, and he could feel the walls of his circuits stretching, tearing, and healing all at once in a maddening loop of destruction and repair. Endure. Direct. Control it. He could feel his mind guide him, as Monarch's indifference seemed to be working overtime to maintain rationality through this irrational pain. Gritting his teeth, Leo focused everything into his flow, directing the mana through his arms, legs, spine, as the potion-fueled torrent continued to rampage within. His skin flushed red, veins bulging across his body as mana-infused blood began interfacing with his nervous system. And then, it began. The chakra nodes started forming. First along his spine, tiny convergence points where mana circuits, nerves, and blood vessels overlapped and fused. One by one, they ignited, each formation burning like a miniature sun as it locked into place. The pain was searing, but Leo's expression remained fixed, his mind processing each change with surgical clarity. With every new node, his body transformed, muscles growing tighter, more compact, as strength surged through him at levels he had never touched before. Everything felt amplified. Reaction time, movement speed, power output, all operating under a new fuel source, as mana coursed directly into his tissues through his bloodstream. He was faster, sharper, stronger, but it didn't last. What had felt like clean energy began to twist. The mana still circulating inside him started to boil, not figuratively, but literally, as a blistering heat ignited in his chest and spread outward. His veins seared, his muscles throbbed. The mana had begun turning toxic. This was the window. As despite the mind-numbing pain, Leo moved without hesitation. In a single moment, he activated 1,000 phantom slashes, celestial veil, parallel processing, and absolute vision all at once, layering offense, defense, precision, and awareness into a synchronized, explosive burst. His blade screamed through the air, afterimages multiplying in every direction as his limbs blurred into motion. Celestial veil shimmered over his skin, protecting his burning muscles for just long enough to keep moving. Parallel processing fractured his mind into hyper-efficiency, allowing him to cast and strike simultaneously. Absolute vision tracked every particle of motion around him in perfect clarity. With a roar, he drove his blade into the reinforced wall, tearing a chunk of steel loose with sheer force, only for the debris to collapse inward in response. He didn't flinch. Full counter ignited a heartbeat later, his hand flashing up as he redirected the incoming mass midair, returning it with twice the force, vaporizing it in the process and triggering a secondary shockwave. All of this, every skill, every surge of power, happened in the span of half a second. And yet, it wasn't enough. His body still surged with residual mana, skin pulsing red, lungs on fire. So he did it again. Once, then twice, each time pushing harder, layering skills faster, tearing into his surroundings with relentless precision as he burned away every last trace of the unstable energy within him. And finally, there was nothing left. No mana, no strength, no weight behind his limbs, as he managed to burn everything away within 2 seconds, thanks to him layering all his skills one over another. Gah! He dropped to one knee, gasping, as the silence of the chamber pressed down on him like a collapsing star. His body trembled, blood cooling, skin pale. His muscles refused to contract fully, his heart slowed, and a sensation unlike anything he had ever felt set in. He felt like a fish out of water. Breathless, suffocating, dying, and then he reached inward. Summoning the natural mana stored in his core, and deep within the very cells of his blood, as he began to circulate it. Slowly at first, his consciousness tethered to the fragile thread of life still flickering inside him, as he guided the pure, stable mana through his freshly expanded circuits. The difference was immediate. Where the potion's mana had burned like wildfire, his own mana moved like cool water, soothing, harmonizing, filling. Gasp! Leo inhaled sharply, his lungs expanding as life returned to his body in waves. His vision steadied, his heartbeat normalized, and his body, reborn under a new law, came alive once more. He had done it. He had successfully become a Grand Master without any accidents, as the chamber's gates slid open, and a team of medical staff rushed all around him. Rodova Military Academy, Principal Ulrich's office. WHIRRR. Tap ** tap. The quiet hum of the air system was the only sound in the vast chamber, broken occasionally by the gentle tapping of a stylus against glass. Principal Ulrich Dainhardt sat at his polished desk, legs crossed, eyes scanning a glowing data slate resting on the surface before him. A live biometric breakdown of Leo Skyshard flickered across the screen, as Ulrich studied the improvements that had happened in his body after the tier promotion. As per protocol, Leo was taken to the physical assessment chamber after his breakthrough, where the machines took a new reading of his body, providing Ulrich with a whole new data set to compare Leo's previous self to now. Muscle tensile strength, plus 273%. Explosive force output, plus 292%. Recovery speed, cellular regeneration, plus 315%. Stamina recovery rate, plus 244%. Tendon durability, plus 267%. Joint flexibility, plus 228%. Neuromuscular reflex speed, plus 358%. He exhaled, long, slow, and deep, as a grin tugged at the corner of his lips. Impressive, he murmured, leaning back in his chair as he laced his fingers together over his chest. If there had been one area where Leo had noticeably lagged behind his peers before his tier promotion, it had been raw strength. His tactical thinking, combat intuition, and mana control had always been elite, but his physical output was average at best. But not anymore. Ulrich flicked the screen, bringing up a comparative bar graph of Leo's stats from 6 months ago versus now. The transformation was staggering. Growth rates in the 200–400% range across every category. While several areas had even crossed the 350% threshold, especially those linked to movement, speed, and neuromuscular precision. Leo's current baseline strength now sat squarely within the range of the Academy's elite Grandmaster warriors of the past, and just a notch below Su Yang, who had long been hailed as the strongest physical combatant to join Rodova within the past 100 years. But Leo did not need to match Su Yang's raw power anymore. Because where Yang had brute force, Leo had speed. Where Yang could punch through stone, Leo could appear behind his opponent before the punch even landed. He's closed the gap in his weakness, and widened the gap in his strengths, Ulrich whispered, a note of admiration entering his tone. What a terrifying result, a prodigious breakthrough. He set the data slate down and took a moment to simply breathe. Weeks of pressure, of holding his breath for this exact moment, finally dissolved into satisfaction. The boy had made it through. Not only that, he had exceeded expectations in every category that mattered. Ulrich's eyes drifted toward the window, his gaze piercing through the glass to the sprawling campus outside. Beyond the courtyard, he could see instructors moving about, cadets running drills, and the unmistakable energy of anticipation rising across the academy grounds. Circuit team selections, 2 days from now. He could already imagine it. Those idiots who doubted me, he said with a chuckle, rising from his chair and straightening his coat. Those idiots who said it's stupid to just invest so many resources into uplifting 2 talents. They have no idea what's about to happen, Ulrich said, as he gleefully chuckled to himself. Skyshard, Yang, those 2 stepping onto the battlefield tomorrow against senior students a full tier below them, it's going to be a bloodbath. He said, his voice holding no malice, just certainty. Rodova Military Academy, Ni and Fei's room. He's done it. Leo broke through without any hiccups. Ni and Fei informed via the communication crystal, as the silence that followed wasn't a surprise. It was as expected. A few heartbeats passed before a voice echoed from the crystal, low, male, and frigid as stone submerged in still water. As he should. The elder's tone carried no praise. Only inevitability. I trust you're still monitoring him closely, the voice continued. Now more than ever, we need to understand his rate of growth. A Grand Master at his age is rare, but not unprecedented. Faye nodded once. I've kept detailed records of his progression. There's been no deviation in behavior, so far. Good. That may change. Strength awakens memory. And memory for him, is dangerous. There was a faint crackle in the air as the elder's tone sharpened. If he awakens memories of his family before we give it to him, it may make Leo distrust us, as he may be exposed to a half-picture. Instead, let's use his memories as a carrot and dangle it before him to perform well at the circuits. Inform the boy that if he performs well at the circuits and gets selected to join the Black Serpents Guild, he is to be given memories of his family back, the elder instructed, as Faye widened her eyes in surprise. Leo's family remained the cult's most powerful leverage over him, and his family was the only reason behind Leo agreeing to take on such a difficult mission. If Leo somehow recalled fragments of his family life before the evil cult returned his memories, it could cause his behavior to change drastically, as depending on what he recalls, his impression of the evil cult may shift dramatically. Under such circumstances, the promise of giving him back his memories in due time was the best counter to him not becoming restless. Which was why Faye wholeheartedly agreed with the elder's suggestion. Very well, it shall be done as you suggested, Faye confirmed, as the connection abruptly terminated. With Leo now becoming a Grand Master, his life in the shadows was nearing its end, as once he stepped onto the limelight of the circuits, very soon every major power in the universe was going to be made aware of a budding new talent called Leo Skyshard. Under such scrutiny, whether Leo thrived or failed would determine not only his own future, but the future of the whole evil cult. As although the elder did not voice those words today, me and Faye could already hear them being whispered in between the pauses of his sentences. The next dragon. Me and Faye knew it. Leo had it in him to become the next dragon, and from today onwards, he was on a fast track to getting there. End of Volume 1. The Timeless Assassin, Volume 2. The Next Dragon. If you study the psychology of those affiliated with the so-called evil cult, you will find not madness but extreme narcissism. They do not deny the supremacy of gods out of disbelief. They reject them out of competition. To them, divinity is not a destination, it is a rival to be outshone, surpassed, and ultimately destroyed. Dr. Major Clausen, Universal Government Psychology of Crime Journal, Volume 87. Planet Ixtal, capital world of the Cult of Ascension. If seen through an objective lens, then Ixtal was just another bustling planet, rich in biodiversity, climate-zoned cities, and a population exceeding 12 billion civilians. Markets thrived. Small police ships patrolled its orbit. Children played in the streets of domed arcologies that kissed the clouds. At a glance, it was no different from any other highly urbanized planetary hub in the galaxy. But that illusion ended the moment one tried to leave orbit. Ixtal's defense systems were unmatched. Entire continents were rigged with anti-arc ship rail turrets capable of punching through planetary shields. The atmosphere itself was layered with invisible disruption webs and complex mono-arrays that were designed to tear apart any unauthorized warp drives before they could initiate jump sequences. Its skies were protected by hardened orbital arrays, capable of tracking and vaporizing a fleet within seconds of detection. And the surface. Its largest cities were hidden behind folded space barriers, their locations warped and redirected through a network of reality distortion nodes so intricate that even the universal government had yet to map them. All of this protection, all of this effort, was not for the 12 billion civilians. It was for the man who ruled from within its heart. Soren, the current god of the Cult of Ascension, known to the rest of the universe only as the Evil Cult. Nestled within the dense canopy of the Lost Forest, far from the floating cities and military complexes, stood a castle, if one could call it that. No taller than a noble's estate, nor grander than a baron's fortress. Its stone walls were gray, unpolished. No spires reached for the stars. No symbols adorned its face. The castle was quiet, functional, unassuming, and it reflected its occupant and his simple nature. Inside the castle, from the innermost chamber, steam curled upward from a sunken medicinal bath that glowed with a dim crimson light. Crystalline herbs floated in the liquid, hissing as they slowly dissolved, releasing pungent fumes that smelled of copper and burnt incense. A man stood at the edge of the bath, his body slack, robes loosely draped over his shoulders. Cough, cough. The sound echoed in the silence, dry, harsh, mortal. A god should not cough. Gods, after all, were four-dimensional creatures, transcendent beings capable of rewinding time, skipping to moments before they were harmed, erasing wounds from the record of reality itself. And yet, as Soren let his robe fall to the ground, the truth came into view. His body was ravaged. Long black scars crisscrossed his chest and arms, some deep, others shallow, but all very much real. Where wounds hadn't sealed, dark pus leaked from open lesions that shimmered with corrupted energy, pulsing in rhythm with some otherworldly parasite that no amount of time manipulation could erase. The immortality of gods had failed him. TWUP. He stepped slowly into the bath, the liquid making a slight noise as the surface tension broke, as immediately he let out a breath of relief, as the heat of the bath met his raw flesh. The crimson fluid clung to his skin like blood. His eyes remained half-lidded, unfocused, as if seeing far beyond the chamber. Beyond Ixtal. Beyond the universe. And yet, still trapped here. Still wounded. Still dying. The wounds inflicted from the blade of the timeless assassin did not heal. It was the only blade in the universe which inflicted unhealable wounds, which was a big reason behind the timeless assassin being able to kill as many gods as he did. However, unfortunately after the great betrayal 2,000 years ago, that blade fell into the hands of Caliph the Eternal Sovereign, or rather Caliph the dog. Who unfortunately happened to be his elder brother. However, although the great betrayal was 2,000 years ago, Soren still bore the wounds of that day. The wounds inflicted on him during that day's fight refused to heal even 2,000 years later, as although he survived that day, the blade's lingering corruption energy developed an infection in his body over time. The infection had spread slowly at first, looking nothing more than lingering mana rot from the blade that had once slain gods. But now, even a god's divine physiology could no longer keep pace. The pus that oozed from beneath his scars was not ordinary rot. It was legacy poison, remnants of an unhealable truth, that Soren was dying. TWABLE. Soren shifted in the bath, the crimson water lapping at the sides as another breath escaped his lips. Not out of pain, but from acceptance. I'm running out of time. He had known this for a while, but he kept the knowledge hidden beneath centuries of strength and ceremony. But the signs had grown harder to ignore recently. Longer recoveries. Slower mana cycling. And now, even his grip on time was beginning to slip. A god who could not step beyond the fourth dimension was a pretender, nothing more than an injured demigod playing dress-up with immortality. And Soren had already accepted the fact that he was no longer the warrior that he once was. And that meant one thing. If no one rose to take his place soon, the cult of ascension, aka the evil cult, as the universe called it, would fall. The universal government had tolerated Ixtal's independence not out of mercy, but fear. Soren's existence had been the shield, the great unknown that even their pantheon of gods tread carefully around. While the other cult-held worlds, scattered and few, clung to that illusion of protection like drowning men to driftwood. But once he was gone, without him, there would be no deterrent, no balance, no bluff to play. 150 years, he thought. That's all I can afford them. After that, the image formed in his mind unbidden, black flames spreading across Ixtal's cities, orbit cannons silenced, and warships breaching folded space barriers with contemptuous ease. And then silence. That would be the end. Unless someone stepped forward. Unless the prophecy came true. Soren's eyes narrowed slightly as he dipped lower into the bath, the blood-red liquid reaching his lips. He believed in the prophecy. He believed that someone from his bloodline would someday rise to become the next timeless assassin. However, he just didn't know when. He had spent the last 100 years engineering the perfect storm, curating bloodlines, manipulating blood oaths, bending fate until it aligned just enough to carve out a single chance. One candidate, one vessel, one dragon, but unfortunately, not one promising candidate had appeared yet. No one that could truly take his spot. As it was this pressure of having no suitable candidate, that made Soren feel like he was aging a year with every passing month. 2,000 years. But I still miss you, Father. 2,000 years, and I still couldn't leave a legacy half as good as yours. Rodova Military Academy, Circuit Team Selection Day. Circuit's selection day at Rodova was always a strange blend of hope and heartbreak, as cadets who had trained for months, sometimes even their entire lives for the circuits, gathered in the Rodova Grand Arena with a single dream in mind, which was to make it to the interstellar circuits. The interstellar circuit was a chance to stand beneath the galaxy's spotlight, to be watched by billions, to fight on the grandest stage and to have one's name whispered in recruitment halls across the stars. And hence, almost all students who enrolled into Rodova, almost always competed to try and make it to the circuits, as it was truly a tournament like no other. For the 125 students who had enrolled into Rodova this year, today was the day that their dream of making it to the circuit would either come to life, or quietly wither into dust, as Rodova operated under a strict meritocracy, where talent reigned supreme and strength served as the only currency. In Rodova, even the current circuit team members, despite representing the academy through every preseason match, could potentially lose their team slots today to another, should they be bested in battle. As Rodova provided this one final opportunity to all, where anyone with the strength could make it to the team. It didn't matter if you were a first-year student. It didn't matter if you were a second year who was not selected for the summer camp or the team up till now. If you could claim your spot today, you could still go to the circuits. The viewing hall outside the arena buzzed with nervous energy. Dozens of cadets stood shoulder to shoulder, gear strapped tight, all eyes locked on the bracket screens as names continued to load. I heard 93 people signed up to face the weakest fighter in the circuits team this year, someone muttered. Nearly double what it was last year. So I kinda pity them all, for they will have to face each other before they face Enzo. A first year clenched his fists. Please don't match me with a second year. Second year. Bro, if I end up in Leo's bracket, I'm throwing the towel before the bell rings. Laughter tried to lighten the tension, but it quickly faded. Even without stepping into the arena, Leo Skyshard and Su Yong had already warped the tournament just by existing. Both had broken through to Grandmaster status, something unheard of for first years, and the rumors of their training duels with instructors were the stuff of hallway legend. Su Yang's not even ranked yet and people are saying he's stronger than most of the students from Geneva. Leo's worse. I lost vision of him while he was sparring with Professor Powell once and he just vanished. I don't think he even uses the same metrics as us anymore. Suddenly, the conversations died as a familiar sound cut through the chatter. Clack, clack, clack. Major Hen entered with a clipboard in hand and a face like a loaded weapon. He didn't speak right away, just looked over the room like he was waiting for the chatter to die down. Listen up, he finally said, flicking his wrist, as 10 portraits floated into view, each representing one of the current circuit team members. Rank, year, combat stats. You've all selected your opponents for today. And before you guys bitch or moan, let me inform you that your choices are now locked. There will be no redraws, nor any change requests entertained, Hen said, as a few nervous murmurs spread across the room. If you're the only challenger for a slot, congratulations, you fight the team member directly. Win against him, her, and the spot on Rodova's circuit team is yours. But if multiple cadets challenge the same team member, you'll fight each other first. Elimination style, with only one of you finally getting the right to face the team member. He paused, scanning the room. So those of you who purposefully picked the easiest opponent to dethrone, understand that there might be many more who shared your mindset and you're now stuck in a long and drawn-out elimination battle before you can even challenge the team member. while those of you who challenged an opponent above your weight class. Congratulations, you now have a date with the devil. Hen said, as listening to his speech, a voice from the back immediately grumbled, shucks, I should have picked someone obscure, I knew Enzo would get dog-piled. Another cadet hissed, please, just let me avoid Leo or Yang in my pool. Anyone else, I'll manage. There were no safe bets. Going for the weakest meant a free-for-all bloodbath. While going for the strongest meant likely defeat, but fewer steps to get there. And now, the choices were final. In a separate corridor, the 10 current circuit team members waited. Suited up, silent. Their armor gleamed beneath the dome lights, but there was no pride in their posture. Just tension. Because for them, this wasn't about glory. It was about survival. One bad fight, one unlucky draw, and it all ended. A year of sacrifice, training, politics, and practice, erased. This is bullshit, one of them thought, flexing his jaw behind his faceguard. I fought in 5 prep matches. I led drills. I missed classes to prepare for these circuits. And now some first-year punk gets to kick me off the team because he had a lucky growth spurt. They hated the system, but they couldn't deny it. Rodova didn't care who you were yesterday. It only cared who you were today. And although they hated to admit it, right now most of the team members were just praying they did not draw Leo or Su Yang against themselves. Rodova Combat Dome, internal warm-up zone. Away from the crowd, in a private warm-up alcove, Leo exhaled slowly as he rolled his neck, each movement precise and measured. Beside him, Mu Shen sat with both blades across his lap, eyes closed, meditating. While Su Yang stood against the wall, rotating his shoulder, lips pressed into a thin line. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Leo hadn't bothered checking brackets. He already knew who he was going for. His fists clenched softly as mana rippled beneath the surface of his skin. It's time I redeem myself. Power hummed inside him, tighter, denser, cleaner than it had ever been. I'll match him punch for punch today, no tricks. No techniques. Just raw force. A faint smile touched his lips as his eyes gleamed. For the first time in months, he was looking forward to a fight. Su Yang, meanwhile, wasn't thinking about the circuits. Or the team. Or even the tournament. He was thinking about her. Minerva. The one opponent who had beaten him. Publicly. Brutally. Today wasn't about proving himself to the academy. It was about proving something to himself. Everyone had told him not to do it. That going against Minerva was stupid. That if he faced anyone else, he'd cruise to victory. But Yang wasn't looking for an easy win. He was looking for redemption. Even if his actions risked damaging Rodova's strongest ever circuit lineup, even if it meant only 3 grandmasters might make it through instead of 4, he didn't care. This wasn't about the academy. This wasn't about strategy. This was personal. And win or lose, Su Yang had no intention of leaving that arena without the answer he sought. The brackets on the massive arena display board began to populate, each name appearing with an agonizing slowness, until finally, after what felt like a nervous eternity, the full roster was complete. 1. Yu Shen, C, 0 challengers. 2. Kyal, VC, 3 challengers. 3. Minerva, 2 challengers. 4. Jude, 7 challengers. 10. Enzo, 93 challengers. The bracket display on the arena's massive holoboard finally locked in, illuminating the room as the matchups beneath each team member began auto-populating into cascading sub-brackets. Almost immediately, every cadet's eyes darted to 3 names. The first was their own, just to confirm they were seated under the team member they had selected. The other 2, Leo Skyshard and Su Yang. Holy shit, someone muttered. Skyshard went after Vice Captain Kyal. No way, really. That's a ballsy move. Kyal's only a master, but people say he's this close to a breakthrough. Ballsy move my ass, another voice scoffed. Even the weakest grandmaster folds the strongest master. This isn't a fight, it's an execution. Poor Kyal, guy's getting cooked over a grudge. Speaking of grudges, someone chimed in. Look at Su Yang. He went after Phasm instead of Minerva. Guess all that talk about revenge was just that, talk. No, man. Another cadet groaned. Phazim's the guy the first picked. Why the hell did Su Yang have to go for him? Dude, are you serious? Someone else replied with a laugh. You really thought a Grandmaster would challenge another Grandmaster during selections? This isn't a deathmatch. Of course he's going to stomp someone else and secure his spot first. Chatter rippled through the crowd as the implications sank in. Leo going after Kjol wasn't a complete surprise. Rumors of their revenge scuffle had been spreading for months, but Yang choosing Phasm over Minerva. That raised a few eyebrows. As many felt convinced that Su Yang was the petty type that was going to choose personal vindication over greater good. Dash 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 dash. What the hell? Su Yang barked, eyes glued to the bracket board as his voice echoed with fury. His outburst snapped Leo and Mu Shen's attention instantly, both turning to glance at him with raised brows. I clearly selected Minerva, not Phasm, Su Yang growled, fists clenched as his tone edged toward outrage. Someone's messed with my bracket. Without another word, he stormed out of the warm-up zone and onto the arena floor, his footsteps thundering as he marched into the center of the stage and pointed an accusing finger toward the officials' platform. Don't screw with me, Hen. He shouted, voice raw. I didn't pick Phasm and you know it. You know it. A hush fell over the arena as eyes turned toward Major Hen, who remained unmoved, arms folded across his chest as he stared down at Su Yang from the officiating stand. That's enough, boy, Hen said coldly. No one but the principal has the authority to alter brackets once selections are made. So unless you're accusing Principal Ulrich of tampering with your entry, you're wasting everyone's time. All heads turned as one toward the VIP box, where Principal Ulrich sat calmly beside the top sponsors and other influential merchant group owners, sipping champagne as if he hadn't heard a word. He didn't even flinch, didn't even glance Su Yang's way under the accusation, as the silence that followed simply felt suffocating. Su Yang's breath caught in his throat as he realized there was no proof. No logs he could show. No records of his original selection. Just his word, against Rodova's system. And to the rest of the academy, it already looked like he was trying to backpedal, like the guy who picked an easy opponent and was now throwing a tantrum to save face. Hen's voice snapped again. As I said, no changes will be made. Maybe your finger slipped when making your pick. Or maybe you just regret the coward's choice you made. Either way, you're fighting Phasm. You can either throw the match, or suck it up and fight. The choice is yours, Hen said, issuing the ultimatum. As Su Yang stood frozen for a moment, chest rising and falling rapidly, teeth clenched so hard it felt like they'd crack. Fuckers, he cursed under his breath. However, said nothing more, as he turned and walked off the arena floor, jaw tight with frustration. He knew exactly what had happened. Ulrich's eyes, cold and calculating, had said it all. This wasn't an accident. Ulrich had made the call. He didn't want two of his best fighters eliminating each other before the real circuits began. And so, without so much as a conversation, Su Yang's redemption had been stolen from him. Rewritten. Now, he'd be fighting Phasm. And all he could do was accept it. Dash 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 dash. From across the arena, if there was one man who gave Ulrich a nod of genuine appreciation, it was Yu Shen. The captain of the circuit's team was the only individual with 0 challenges to his name, as his reputation as Rodova's strongest was enough to deter any and all competitors. Su Yang, you fool. The circuits are bigger than just your petty revenge. I know you're mad today. But I'll give you your chance to fight Minerva fair and square in training. But I need you both on my team if we are to win, Yu Shen thought, as he didn't doubt that Su Yang had chosen Minerva as his opponent, however, felt glad that Ulrich had intervened. Unbuckle. Unbuckle. Unbuckling his gear, Yu Shen stripped down to just his usual Rodova uniform, as being scheduled to fight no opponents today, he no longer needed the armor. Instead, he lazily stretched and began walking towards the first-year warm-up area, as there were a couple things he wished to discuss with Su Yang and Leo before the fight. Things that were important for their future in the circuits. Dash 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 dash. An eerie silence swept through the first-year warm-up room the moment Yu Shen stepped inside. As for a brief second, every student paused, their eyes lighting up with a mix of hope and curiosity, wondering if the captain had come to offer some last-minute words of motivation before the matches began. But that hope quickly faded. As soon as they noticed his gaze locked straight ahead, unmoving, razor-focused on the two figures stretching quietly in the far corner, as they collectively understood. He hadn't come for them. He was here for Liu and Su Yang. A few cadets sighed under their breath, shoulders slumping slightly as the excitement drained from the room. Yang, Skyshard, Yu Shen greeted as he approached, his voice calm and composed. Yu Shen glanced up from his seated position nearby and let out a quiet cough, tapping a finger to his chest. Yu Shen blinked, realizing the oversight. Shen, he added with a nod. Yu Shen gave a tight smile in return, then stood and quietly stepped away, understanding this conversation wasn't meant for three. As soon as he was gone, Yu Shen lowered his voice. Some of the Merchant Guild reps sitting in the stands today aren't here to cheer Rodova, he said, glancing toward the observation balconies above. They've already got teams, some from Geneva, some from Barakil. They're here to scout, to study, to prepare. He didn't need to elaborate further. They're not looking at the team, he continued. They're looking at you too. Yu Shen folded his arms, his tone firm. So unless it's absolutely necessary, don't show them anything. Win with the bare minimum. No showboating. No exotic combinations. Keep your skill sets hidden for as long as possible. He didn't bother mentioning whether Liu or Su Yang would make it through today's selection. Because in his mind, it wasn't even a question. Their spots were already guaranteed. However, he wanted them to reveal nothing, so that Rodova walked into the circuits with an element of mystery about themselves, as both Su Yang and Liu nodded in understanding. Rodova Military Academy, Circuit Team Selection Day. The elimination matches began shortly after Yu Shen left the first-year warm-up room, as the Academy's military punctuality demanded that the first fight start precisely at 8 a.m., neither a second early nor late. The opening bout saw a wide-eyed first-year step nervously into the ring against a seasoned second-year, as the disparity in skill became obvious the moment the bell rang. It wasn't even close, as the juniors' dream of making it to the circuit team, or at least putting up a respectable fight to secure a summer camp recommendation, was crushed within 40 seconds. Winner, second-year cadet, Lu Zhang, the referee called out flatly, as the next match began without even a pause, the event unfolding with mechanical efficiency. For the first hour, matches proceeded smoothly, as donors, sponsors, and merchant representatives enjoyed the spectacle from the observation decks. The rules capped each fight at 2.5 minutes, as judges only interfered when neither fighter could secure a win within the limit. Yet, rarely did anyone need a judge's call, as most bouts ended well before the timer expired. For a while, the competition advanced without surprises, as cadets conserved their energy while slowly climbing through the brackets. However, once the pools were distilled down to the final 10 contenders, the tension visibly rose, as desperation began bleeding into every strike. If Yu Shen somehow makes it into the top 4, Su Yang said, casually stretching as he spoke to Liu, he'll probably get that summer camp recommendation next year. Liu gave a quiet nod, as both knew that it was easier said than done. But making it all the way? Not likely, Su Yang added as he gestured towards the arena. Liu Yang's too solid. Yu Shen, having targeted Enzo for his challenge, now found himself grinding through match after match, as he advanced past 4 opponents already, battling against a sea of cadets who had also chosen Enzo, the perceived weakest of the circuit team. However, despite the odds stacked against him, Yu Shen went as far as the final 2, where he faced off against Lu Zhang, a second-year whose endurance and refined techniques gave him the edge. As in the end, despite his commendable grit, the final outcome was all but sealed, with him falling just short of challenging a team member. Yet, It was an admirable effort nonetheless, as both Leo and Su Yang silently acknowledged that Mu Shen had all but secured a future invitation to next year's summer camp. As Mu Shen returned to the warm-up area, wiping the sweat from his brow, he couldn't help but sigh in defeat. "Ag, what a drag, guys," he said, forcing a smile. "I did my best, but I guess I won't be standing beside you two this year." "That's all right," Su Yang replied with a smirk, placing a reassuring hand on Mu Shen's shoulder. "You're my vice captain next year anyway. Skyshard can go finger his own ass." Leo raised an eyebrow at the unexpected jab but said nothing, as he simply gave Mu Shen a small nod, acknowledging the valiant effort. Then, in the most anticipated bout of the early morning, Enzo faced off against Lu Zhang, the winner of the brackets, as the first circuit team spot came into play. However, as expected, Enzo, the actual circuit team member, easily retained his spot, as Lu Zhang failed to even graze him, highlighting to all watching just how vast the gap was between those on the team and the Common Academy cadets. 10:15 a.m., Rodova Combat Dome. It was around 10:15 a.m. when an assistant referee finally stepped into the first-year warm-up room, clipboard in hand, calling out, "Su Yang. You're up in 15. Su Yang, who had been leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, slowly opened his eyes as he pushed off and began to stretch, each motion deliberate and controlled, as he mentally prepared for his bout. There were a total of 12 fighters who had challenged Faison for his spot, giving a few a bypass from the first round of fights. And luckily, Su Yang was one of them. He only had to fight 3 rounds instead of 4 to face Faison, however, he did not really care about the bypass anyways. Crack, crack, cracking his knuckles, Su Yang grinned rather evilly, as he seemed like he was in one of his foulest moods, where his frustrations were about to come out on innocent opponents. "I'll crush them all without using a single technique," Su Yang said calmly, his voice laced with quiet irritation as the earlier bracket incident still lingered in his mind. "Bare hands will be enough." The cadets near him stiffened, as none dared to doubt him, as his words didn't carry the air of arrogance, but the certainty of someone fully capable of carrying out the claim. With nothing more to say, Su Yang stepped into the staging area as the assistant quickly led him toward the ring. First match, against Cadet Hearth, first year. The bell for Su Yang's first match rang, as the arena was met with mild curiosity from the crowd, given that Su Yang's first opponent was none other than Hearth, a fellow first year, known for being decent but far from remarkable. Yet the moment Su Yang's golden eyes locked onto Hearth's, the crowd realized this wouldn't even be a slight contest as the junior began to tremble uncontrollably. Domination. Su Yang's innate bloodline trait seemed to oppress the hell out of Hearth, who could not handle the pressure, as the poor guy struggled to make his legs cooperate with his brain, his composure shattering like a glass beneath pressure. Ding! The match officially began, yet Su Yang didn't even bother to raise his fists, as he simply walked forward, shoulders relaxed, expression unreadable. "Move," Su Yang said calmly as Hearth's instinct screamed at him to run, but his body betrayed him, as terror rooted him to the spot. He tried to swing, desperate for any semblance of control, but the blade was caught between Su Yang's bare fingers effortlessly, as if swatting away a branch. Before anyone could react, Su Yang delivered a casual palm strike to Hearth's chest, sending him airborne as he crashed out of the ring like a ragdoll. Thud. First match, Su Yang advances, the referee declared after a stunned pause. As the audience erupted, at the unbelievably dominating performance. Second match, against Cade, second year. Su Yang's next opponent was Cade, a hardened second year who clenched his fists tightly as he tried to mask his nerves beneath a facade of forced bravado. "You won't toss me around like that last kid," Cade said, stepping into the ring with flaring aura, as he entered a cautious stance. Su Yang said nothing, as he simply adjusted his shoulders while raising his fists to waist level, his stance as relaxed as if he were simply preparing to go for a walk. Ding! Cade charged in, unleashing a barrage of tightly packed punches, each targeting Su Yang's weak points with practiced precision. However, Su Yang merely shifted. Each movement was minimal, as he slipped past Cade's attacks without wasting a single motion, his head tilting by mere inches, his feet barely stepping. Frustration seeped into Cade's strikes, as desperation replaced technique, as Su Yang, without so much as blinking, caught the senior's extended wrist, twisted it, and slammed Cade headfirst into the dirt. Boom! Cade didn't even attempt to rise. Second match, Su Yang advances, the referee announced, eyes wide. Dash 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 dash. Third match, against Vega, second year. Vega, Su Yang's final challenger before Phasm, looked visibly shaken as he stepped into the ring against Su Yang. His earlier cocky grin from previous hours was nowhere to be found, as his aura flickered uncertainly. You think you're better than us just because you got lucky and became Grandmaster. Vega growled, forcing himself to sound intimidating. Breaking through doesn't make you invincible. Su Yang's gaze didn't waver, as he simply rolled his shoulders and raised his fists. Ding! Vega wasted no time as he activated his skill, 20 tilted slashes filling the air with dozens of sharp strikes, as he attempted to overwhelm Su Yang with sheer speed and aggression. However, Su Yang moved like water. His feet shifted precisely, as his body leaned and rotated effortlessly, as every blade narrowly missed by fractions of an inch, as if Vega's entire skill had been read like an open book. And then, it ended. Su Yang caught Vega's blade mid-swing with his bare hand, twisted his opponent's stance open, and drove his palm directly into Vega's solar plexus. Crack! Vega's knees buckled, as air fled from his lungs. A second later, Su Yang delivered a light shove, as Vega stumbled backward and collapsed outside the ring. Third match, Su Yang advances, the referee called, almost sounding tired of repeating himself. As the arena erupted in cheers over Su Yang's performance once again, with Su Yang lightly waving to the crowd as he stepped out of the arena, with not so much as a slight change to his angry expression. He hadn't used a single skill. He hadn't drawn a single weapon. And yet, he had humiliated 3 opponents with nothing but his bare hands, leaving the watching cadets speechless. Even the sponsors exchanged glances, murmuring quietly, as for the first time today, some realized. This year's Rodova team might just be more terrifying than what the rumors had them believing. They had come here today expecting to check out the rumors of Rodova having 2 new Grandmaster students. However, with how dominating Su Yang was, they didn't even get a gauge on his true strength. Rodova Military Academy, spectator stand, the VIP box. Principal Ulrich sat leisurely, swirling his glass of champagne as the murmurs of the merchant groups and sponsors around him flooded the private gallery. His eyes flicked lazily across their expressions, widened eyes, whispered exchanges, and barely contained intrigue. As he couldn't help but scoff internally, his contempt masked behind a calm facade. We thought Clarence Academy was going to usurp Rodova and steal the number 2 spot this year, murmured one representative from the Silvergrain Syndicate, stroking his beard. But seeing this, Rodova still has teeth. Su Yang, the Su family's young master, another whispered. Why did he enroll into Rodova? Why not Geneva? With talent like that, Geneva would have rolled out the red carpet for him. A third, sharper voice then cut in, belonging to the Grey Metal Consortium's representative. Geneva's loss is our opportunity. From what I hear, the Su family hasn't tied him to any sponsors yet. Perhaps we can rope him in early. The way he fights, he'll be the team captain by next year and worth a lot of money. Ulrich chuckled quietly to himself as he took a sip. Vultures, all of you. Like hell I'll let you sponsor Su Yang for cheap now. Yet not every face shared the excitement. The Horizon Merchant Group's representative sat stiffly, arms crossed, eyes narrowed with clear dissatisfaction. The Horizon Group, who had shifted allegiance from Rodova to Clarence Academy earlier this year, now looked like they had bet on the wrong horse, as Rodova seemed to be on the road to resurgence. Ulrich noticed the sour expression and immediately smiled in satisfaction, as he found the Horizon Group's misery to be delightful. Regretting the switch now, aren't you? He thought, as he let out yet another amused chuckle. Dash 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 dash. Meanwhile in the general viewing stands, amongst the non-participating cadet population, the chatter was just as animated. Phazon's doomed. There's no way he holds onto his spot. An archer against Su Yang. And not even a good one like Minerva. He's finished. They should have just handed Su Yang the spot without wasting Phazon's time. Although a few optimistic voices tried to defend Phazon's chances, the general sentiment was that the senior was about to be crushed. Phazon was good, but Su Yang was something else. And everyone knew it. Dash 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 dash. Combat arena, center stage. Phazon stood at the ready, bow in hand, breathing measured but betraying subtle nerves as he stared down Su Yang, who was now walking onto the stage with the same lazy composure he had displayed all morning. Su Yang's blade hung loosely at his side, as if it weren't even part of the fight yet, as just like his previous fights, he did not draw out his weapon this time either, which caused the audience to let out a few nervous gasps. So arrogant that you won't even pull out your weapon. Do I look that weak in your eyes? Phazon asked, as Su Yang shook his head in denial. It's not about you being weak. Which you are no doubt, but it's just that I don't want to reveal my swordsmanship to the universe just yet. So I'll he holding that card close to my chest for now, Su Yang replied, as Phazon grit his teeth in anger. Ding! The match began as Phazon's bow snapped upward immediately, his eyes sharp with focus as he activated his signature skill, Phantom Quiver. Causing 5 semi-transparent spectral arrows to materialize midair beside him. Without hesitation, he fired the first volley, launching 3 arrows in rapid succession as each one curving unnaturally mid-flight, as they arched toward Su Yang's limbs. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. With precise footwork, Su Yang sidestepped the arrows by mere inches, letting them whistle harmlessly past, as the entire crowd tensed at his calm and precise evasion. Phazon gritted his teeth as he immediately backed away while knocking another arrow, this time channeling mana heavily as he activated his second technique. Rain of Binding. A barrage of mana-imbued arrows exploded outward from Phazon's position, filling the arena with dozens of arrows that blurred into a net-like formation, threatening to completely trap Su Yang. Cheers erupted from the spectators as the trap looked flawless. But Su Yang's eyes remained steady. Predictable, he muttered under his breath, as he raised his hand and activated flowing steps. A mobility technique that allowed his body to shift like a flowing current, seamlessly weaving between the incoming arrows with delicate but blindingly fast footwork. Each step was impossibly smooth, and each movement reduced the chaos of the arrow net into mere background noise, as he carved a path straight toward Phazon. Phazon's eyes widened as he hurriedly activated his trump card. Piercing Luna. An arrow condensed with nearly all of his remaining mana, glowing silver as it promised devastating penetration. He drew it back fully, aiming for Su Yang's navel, as the tension in the arena peaked. Yet Su Yang didn't even blink. With one swift step, he entered striking range, as he tightly gripped his sword, not to swing, but to feint and instead activate Iron Breaker Palm. As while his opponent expected a sword slash, Su Yang's real intention was to unleash a martial skill designed to collapse an opponent's guard with a single blow. Boom! Su Yang's palm collided with Phazon's chest the moment before the arrow was loosed, as crack! Asterisk. The arrow fired wildly into the air as Phazon's entire frame was lifted off the ground, crashing against the arena floor as his bow snapped in half beneath him. Thud! Phazon coughed violently as the referee rushed forward, to prevent Su Yang from injuring Phazon even more, as he threw his body between the two contestants. Match over. Winner, Su Yang, the referee declared, as the crowd exploded into shouts and applause. Not just because of Su Yang's overwhelming victory, but due to the perfect suppression of Phazon's every trick. Sponsors exchanged hurried whispers, noting each of Su Yang's moves displayed today with wary interest, as the fact that he didn't even need to draw his sword raised some major concerns. Su Yang, meanwhile, sheathed his half-drawn blade without a word, as he calmly turned his back to the fallen archer and walked toward the waiting area as if nothing had happened, as Major Hen from the professor's stands took up a microphone and announced to whole academy that Su Yang, a first year, had replaced Phazon to officially become a part of the Rodova Circuits team. And that he shall represent the academy at the Interstellar Circuits this year. Su Yang, Su Yang, Su Yang. Chants of his name rang throughout the arena, as he seemed to become a role model for all first years once again. The stain of his previous defeat diluting, as even his haters could not help but admit to his dominance. It wasn't the showing that he wanted for today, as his goal was to fight Minerva. However, it was a showing he could be proud of, as from start to finish he did not even break a sweat, scoring convincing victories over all his opponents, as he should with a tier difference. Couple of hours after Su Yang had punched his name onto the circuit's team roster, it was finally Leo's turn to step into the spotlight. Other than him, two others had challenged Vice Captain Kjol for his coveted spot. Yet, thanks to a stroke of luck, Leo had bypassed the first bout, allowing the two seniors to eliminate each other first. Now, only one stood in his way, the winner of the earlier clash, before he could face Kjol himself. Cheers. Deafening cheers could be heard from the crowd as Leo walked into the arena, as the spectators and the VIPs got excited for Rodova's second hidden talent. There he is. Leo Skyshard in the flesh. So that's the rumored speed specialist. Is he really that good? I mean, Su Yang's strength makes sense when you look at his body, but Skyshard looks lanky and frail. Don't be stupid. Rumor says he left a nasty dagger slash against the chin of previous year team captain during one of his training spars, and he wasn't even a grandmaster at that point. The crowd chattered, as after Su Yang's dominant performance, expectations regarding Leo's fight also seemed to be high. Remember to not reveal too much. The less the better, Leo reminded himself as he stepped onto the arena, as his gray eyes, glowing faintly, scanned the opponent standing across from him. His opponent, a second-year named Viren, looked tense as he readied his longsword. He visibly gulped when Leo made eye contact with him, as he seemed to be aware of Leo's ruthless reputation, but still seemed to be hoping to pull off an upset. All the best. You'll need the luck, Leo said coldly before the fight began, as he loosely pulled out two daggers from his utility belt and assumed his usual fighting stance. Ding! The match officially began. Yet Leo did not rush forward. He knew he had the upper hand here, and that the opponent would try to charge first to not let him gain rhythm, which was why he patiently waited for Viren to come at him. Ha! Viren screamed while rushing, as he activated the skill Piercing Fang, which was a straight-line thrust skill meant to capitalize on reach. But Leo's eyes didn't even flinch as he sidestepped at the last second, slipping past the strike's edge with surgical precision as he allowed the attack to barely graze his uniform. Fast! Someone in the crowd gasped. Wait, am I tripping or did I see afterimages of his movement for a second? Another added, as with a short pivot, Leo's right dagger slashed upward, deflecting Viren's blade midair before his left dagger found its way cleanly into Viren's shoulder guard. Not deep enough to cripple, but more than enough to send him staggering backward. Kya! The man screamed from pain, as he slashed wildly to push Leo back. However, Leo's footwork, guided by absolute vision, kept him always a hair's breadth away from danger, while the calm brought to his psyche by Monarch's indifference helped him dissect every subtle movement of his opponent's sword and body. Huff! Huff! Viren, now pale, activated Steel Barrage, a flurry of slashes designed to overwhelm. Yet Leo, calm as still water, weaved between every strike, leaving afterimages as he moved. And then, with one clean diagonal cross-cut from both daggers, Leo disarmed him entirely, sending Viren's sword clattering to the ground, as he followed it up with a second dagger pointed to his neck. W winner, Leo Skyshard advances. The referee declared in a rush, as he pushed Leo away from his opponent. Cheers! The audience broke into a mixture of gasps and applause, as most held their foreheads in disbelief with how fast and clean Leo's fighting style looked. He didn't even activate an offensive technique. That was all footwork and reading, no actual skills except for reaction buffs. He's terrifying. The audience reacted, as Leo quietly returned to his corner, preparing for the next challenge, which was his revenge bout against Kjol. Leo was called back onto the main stage not even 5 minutes after his previous bout had ended, as Kjol stood already waiting for him at the center of the arena, his massive greatsword slung casually over his shoulders. The difference in their presence was palpable. Kjol, though visibly calm, carried the demeanor of a man who had accepted the reality of the difficult duel before it even began, while Leo eyed him like a predator looking for revenge. There was no animosity between the two. No personal hatred. However, the circumstances surrounding their bout made it so that both felt their energy levels raised higher than usual. Leo sought redemption, while Kjol wanted to hold onto his circuit spot. And hence neither was willing to back down from the initial gaze-off. "You know," Kjol started, his voice carrying smoothly through the arena, "I had a feeling we'd meet again ever since our first bout ended." The audience quieted as his words echoed. "And I knew that, because of your talent, you would surpass me by the time that day came." He let out a self-deprecating chuckle as he lowered his sword to his side. "Some nights, that thought stole my sleep. Other nights, it pushed me to work harder." Kjol's grip tightened slightly. "This past year, it was probably the fear of fighting you again that drove me to the very brink of becoming a grandmaster. I tried everything, but it wasn't enough." He took a deep breath and, without any trace of bitterness, smiled. "That being said, you did your best when we first fought and took my arm off. So I intend to do the same today." He pointed his blade directly at Leo. "This time, I'll return the favor." Leo, seeing no hesitation or fear in Kjol's eyes, couldn't help but crack a small grin. "Do your best," Leo said softly as, ding, the match began. For a few tense seconds, neither moved, as the entire crowd leaned forward in anticipation. Kjol activated Iron Rampart, a defensive stance skill that bolstered his guard, as mana surged around his body, visibly reinforcing his greatsword. But Leo did not hesitate. In a single motion, his footwork blurred, closing the distance with ruthless precision as he activated parallel processing and became a streak of speed and movement unlike anything Kjol could have ever expected. SHHK. Before Kjol could even react, Leo's dagger slipped cleanly past the raised guard, piercing through a gap in the armor, its tip pressed firmly against the cloth over Kjol's heart, as from start to finish, Kjol never even saw him moving. Kjol's eyes widened, not from pain, but from disbelief. He never even got the chance to swing. Never even got to carry out the elaborate plan he had made to fight against Leo, as in the end, the difference between them was as wide as night and day. For a second, the referee hesitated, stunned by the speed himself, before suddenly snapping to his senses as he called the winner of the match. Winner, Leo Skyshard. Ruar. The arena erupted. As Kjol blinked, then, chuckled bitterly. "Well, I thought I was ready for you, but I guess I was just being a delusional fool," he muttered as he stepped back and dropped to one knee, surrendering the spot. As Leo raised his fist in the air, in a triumphant display of his supremacy. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.